Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to another episode of the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. I'm your host. My name is Brian Vitale. Joining me, I've got Chulainn Wu.
How's it going?
Adam Vitale.
Hello.
And Josh Torres.
An eventful weekend.
It is an eventful weekend. No James today. He is over at the Final Fantasy XIV Fan Fest in Las Vegas. He's been tweeting pretty regularly from his Twitter account. Though he has posted a few things onto the site while he is away. So he's, once again, our boots on the ground for the announcement there, which we'll talk about coming up. We're recording this July 29th, the last week before August. Of course, the big upcoming release that's looming is the long-awaited Baldur's Gate 3, and there's, as we've mentioned, a lot of other stuff coming out in August and September and beyond. And a lot of us are looking forward to Armored Core, Starfield, and a few other things passed in October and November. In terms of, we were actually discussing before hitting record button here, like releases for this week, what we've been playing. I was just talking about to Adam and Josh and Chow here that I'd finally finished Zelda. I know Adam has actually finally finished a game that he was playing in preparation for Baldur's Gate 3. We'll talk about that later. I don't know what Chow has been playing. I assume he's been...
I wrote it down on the list.
Oh, you did? Oh, let me pull this up. I don't know how to read. Lost Epic. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, I can talk both.
All right. I don't know what that is, so I'll ask you about that later. The theme of this week is kind of... we have a lot of articles that have gone up on the site, not related to like strictly news or announcements, but some reviews, of course, some previews. There have been some embargoes for previews that have been kind of waiting for much of the summer that James was finally able to publish in the last week or so. And then a few opinion pieces based on some anniversaries over the last week. So we'll kind of at least go through the headlines there and shout them out, even if they don't lead to a ton of discussion, as well as, of course, some opinions based on some of the more recent announcements regarding the new Final Fantasy XIV expansion, etc., etc. In terms of releases for this week, there's only one real new release that we can talk about that isn't still embargoed, and that's a game that Josh was able to put up a review up on the site for, and that is Arcadian Atlas. So, Josh, I've been following this game a little bit since its announcement, and I know this is going to sound very trite, but it is an indie inspired Final Fantasy Tactics-like. Is that, as banal as that might be as a description, is that a correct description?
Sorta. I'd say it leans more to Tactics Ogre than FF Tactics, but it definitely comes from the developers are a big fan of strategy RPGs, especially strategy Japanese RPGs. So they definitely looked like the significant ones in the past. For sure, you could kind of feel that in this game, but their own putting their own identity on it. So. This is a game you may have heard of before a long time ago. It launched its Kickstarter campaign back in 2016, and that is a millennia ago at this point. Since then, they raised obviously enough funds to get the project started and undergoing development. Is from Twin Otter Studios. It's a brand new independent developer team. This is their first game. This is from a brother-sister duo from Texas. And they partnered with Serenity Forge to publish it, and that partnership came to light in 2021. So it's been in the works, the kind of building up a game from scratch, and like this feels like this is truly a project that hey, we're gonna start development on this truly if we are able to raise enough money. It's not like one of those things where it's not like one of those Kickstarter campaigns that they're raising money to show a publisher that hey, please fund this project. It feels like something that they were building from crowdfunded funds, and then way down the road, we're able to get a publisher to just put the game in front of more eyes, like you see a lot of the post E3 type of stuff, like the Summer Games Fest and all the indie sort of collaboration live streams that they can kind of get a lot of indie developers together and put their trailers together and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I got to play this, and it's a pretty. I'm not gonna say it's an amazing strategy RPG. It's decent for as a first game. It's it is.
I was gonna
definitely.
Ask, is this their debut title?
Yeah, it is. So I think it's a decent like debut title in terms of like, hey, what are we capable of this stage? Like taking that first step to like releasing a game out is always like you always hear it from every game developer. It's like, oh, it's always a miracle when a game comes together and it's pushed out. Like it's finally released because game development is so fucking crazy. The way just like the processes you have to go through to get it out and getting everything to come together. So like I think that it's an important first step for the independent developers. Like get something working and push it out, whether it's like a darling or something that's like amazing. I think it's one of those things that like it's important to take that first step and prove to yourself that yes, it is possible that I can make a game and I can release it. It sure might not set the world on fire, but at least I proved to myself and to others that I'm capable of doing this. And of course you can always take lessons learned from from that initial project and saying, okay, what can I do differently next time to improve? Things that I kind of stumbled upon along the way. So that's how I see this project. Where like it's not the most polished, it's not the most perfect, but it is interesting. I did have a decent time with it. So Arcadian Atlas is kind of your typical love story in terms of like the two protagonists are Vashti and Desmond. Early on, the prologue, it establishes that like, hey, they kind of end up at different camps because they're in the middle of this royal conflict where this kingdom, in the Italian, this royal capital, the current thing going on is that the king has been poisoned and is effectively dying, and it's suspected that the queen, because the king remarried and there's like a relatively new queen at the throne, the people are thinking, oh, did the queen poison him to usurp the throne from him? And so the king had two daughters before he remarried. So these used to be the queen's stepdaughters, and this is Lucrezia and Annalise. And Lucrezia is like the older sister, and she effectively storms out of the capital and plans a rebellion against the queen. For obviously killing her dad, or suspected of rather. And then Alice is exiled from the capital because the queen doesn't want her there. Like the stepdaughters and the queen aren't on good terms. And Annalise kind of there's an ongoing conspiracy that Annalise kind of gets wrapped up in after she's exiled to like a monastery. So after it establishes at the prologue, that Vashti and Desmond are different camps. It kind of the first chapter is kind of like a flashback of okay, what led up to them being separated. They used to work together under the Queen Venice's army, the Italian army. So you kind of establish their relationship and what they do with the army, and all that stuff. And at the end of chapter 1, it shows how they got separated. Chapter 2 is kind of a lot of perspective shifting over what Desmond is doing, what Vashti is doing as the war is raging on. It's there's a little time skip, and then chapter 3 is kind of the final stretch of the game where the game, I even mentioned in the review, where everything is kind of leads up to this kind of bog standard end of the world scenario. Things happen at the end of chapter 2 where Annalise is more into play, and it kind of goes into what you're more used to in an RPG that's kind of winding down. Oh, so there's this end of the world plot that it's kind of going towards. And the story doesn't really do anything for me. A lot of the background information, motivations are locked behind character descriptions in the compendium in the game. It's okay, like I said, it's decent, it's mediocre, average. It's not anything crazy. You do get to know a little bit more about other side characters as well. One of their long-standing guards that serves under them. She's kind of has her own story, because as the conflict continues, it kind of reaches into her homeland, and kind of questions her her allegiance to the army if they're starting to attack her homeland in the name of pursuing the rebellion. Then there's my favorite, not really a intimate or deep side story, but you come across a raccoon that consumes something, and like is able to like not like kind of communicate with you and like kind of become its own sentient intelligent being after consuming something. So you effectively have a playable raccoon character that wields a crossbow in your party, and that's cool. I love him. His name's Poncho. Lovely.
Does he name himself, or does he get his name from someone else?
I think they gave his name. They named him Poncho. So I'm pretty sure that's how it went. And then so as you're going along, you kind of get some playable characters along the way, and then there's like a tiny bit of like branching decisions of like, okay, if you decide to like keep this character with you, they'll join your army, and they might affect like a little small story event thing later on in terms of interactions, but it's nothing too significant. Most of your army is gonna be either like by characters you already have at the start of the game, or you like just recruit them from the tavern, kind of like mercenaries. You just like pay a fee and then they join your army. And then like the later on as you progress through the game, like the average level of those mercenaries that you recruit from the tavern, like their average level will go up. So you might get like a level like 30. You'll be able to recruit like a level 30 like cavalier, for example. You just like slot skill points and you don't have to worry about like grinding them or anything like that. So when it comes to gameplay, it's your standard isometric strategy RPG. Can't rotate the camera. This does kind of, I did mention that this kind of made me a little annoyed because like I'm okay with like a fixed isometric camera if you're able to account for like visual clutter in the environments, and making like there's some level of like transparency between like environmental assets, but like not enough. Sometimes it's very difficult to tell like what tile you're highlighting or what tile you want to move on, because there's a lot of like shifting elevations, and then there are just some environmental assets. It's like even if you make them transparent, it's still hard to like kind of determine like what tile you're highlighting. Despite that, along with like different elevations.
I'm kind of two minds about that. Like having a fixed camera, like where it's isometric, but you can only see it from one angle. You can like you see kind of this isn't an isometric game, but like I think of Octopath Traveler 2 kind of messes with that, where they might give you some hint that there's something hidden behind a bluff or behind a ridge where they might have something out of sight that you can see. However, if you're just trying to like move a unit to a certain square and you can't quite tell which one you have selected, then I'd like to have an option to like rotate by 90 degrees, 180 degrees to kind of see like where everything was. So a fixed camera can work if it's intentionally, or like at least makes it clear what you're doing.
Yeah, that's ideally. I would prefer that, but obviously, like people don't really consider like me, but even being able to like rotate the camera in those types of games like does require like a significant level of like having like programming and artistic assets like coming together, because sometimes if you rotate the camera for like these pixel sprites, like something might get fucked up in the rotation, or like something might glitch out, or maybe like the game engine, or like the way that they designed the game, maybe it has difficulty operating, like shifting the perspective and still having like having the game behave the same way despite the perspective shift. Just like small little things like that can.
I'm trying to remember.
Significantly affect the game.
I think I read somewhere that like in certain games, if like a certain texture or a certain model is only intended to be viewed from like one perspective and it's not accounted for viewing it from another perspective, and it like has a glitch in terms of how it appears, there's a term for that. I think it's called like a wormhole or feed hole or something like that. But I in general, regardless of what it's actually called, I can see that where they design a sprite, a model, a character to be viewed from a very specific way, and then if you just allow for free movement of camera, then all of a sudden you've got to account for every single possible way that this thing could be potentially viewed from.
Yeah, so that's how I was like, I viewed it under the lens, like I'm not gonna pin it too hard against them for that. I just wish that like if you're gonna keep me at this like perspective, I wish they kind of polished that end more out to make it more easier to view like where you are when you're navigating which tile you wanna be on in combat. As like for your party, you're usually deploying up to 5 units, sometimes 6, sometimes a little less. Then like very few instances where you force deploy story characters, but like there's not that many instances of that. And you can pretty much like whoever you have in your squad, it kind of gives you free reign on like whatever you want to do. So I kind of stumbled upon a very dumb strategy early on, where like I range DPS in that game is very good. So my team composition for like 99% of that game was like 4 people who wielded crossbows and an apothecary to just kind of make sure that they stay healed. And the 4 crossbow people just like went to work and kind of killed things from a distance. And the only things that ever really hit me were things that like were instant casts from elemental classes and other ranged DPS classes. Other than that, like um melee enemies never got to me, and it was time efficient too because it takes like the pace of battles is pretty slow. It's not like fast forward, and like the animations of like things are like pretty simplistic and somewhat slow. So there was like really no downside as well. And you just kind of make battles faster, and like going with any other team comp just made things slower because most melee classes would really have to be up close and start dealing damage, and the amount of damage they deal like lackluster compared to like range DPS. And two, like even their skills that do like affect multiple tiles or several tiles in front of them, did way less damage. So it was just kind of like a win-win scenario on that end. The game messes with elevation a lot, like I mentioned. So these range DPS has like ranger and hunter that like deal with bows and crossbows. Also have like a significant advantage when they're on higher elevation, so they have better field of view and everything. And it just kind of reinforces why they're so good. It's like they can just like jump to like way higher tiles because they have skill trees that enhance that jump stat that reinforces that. So you can just like play keep away even better if you want, even though they have skills that can just like pin enemies in their place as well. So yeah, so a lot of the game's challenge right off the bat, like early on, kind of disappeared for me after stumbling upon that and testing out my theory in my head, and then seeing how that developed over time. Was like, okay, well, even like the final fight was just like, I think I ended that like in 3 turns, and I barely moved like 2 or 3 spots from the starting location. So for people who don't know like Tactics Ogre PSP, like and really like range the knew how strong range classes were in that game. It's sort of like that. Um, the way that the game handles levels and experience is interesting because there's like no level meters, experience bars, or anything. It's basically if a character participates in a battle, they'll automatically level up by 1. As long as you deployed them in a battle, they'll level up by 1, and then you level up. They get a skill point, and you can slot them into their skill tree. Each initially you start with 4 basic classes, which is like Cavalier, Warmancer, which is like your mages, the wizards, um, Ranger, and Apothecary. And each of their skill trees have like 2 specialties. So, for example, the Cavalier has like a skill tree path that's like that focuses on like one-handed swords and a shield, and there's skills that like require to have those weapons equipped. While another path down the Cavalier tree is like two-handed swords. So like they deal more damage, but they sacrifice a bit of defense for it. After you slot in like 19 or 20 skill points, you can promote that class. So the Cavalier once again can like you can promote it to either Inquisitor or Ronin, and each of the Inquisitor and Ronin classes have their own like branching skill tree as well down separate paths. Like Ronin has Ronin has like a more somewhat support type of build, and one is like kind of like a berserker type of tree, for example. And then like Inquisitor has like kind of once again really holds it on like party support, and one like has one that like does a lot of damage to like undead. And that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of like interesting like synergies and like class variety you can make in mishmash. For me, I was like, I'll just do 4 hunters and 1 monk because the apothecary can go to monk or shaman. and those were pretty neat. Those are pretty cool, like classes to have together, and just kind of broke the game even more. For story characters, like Vashti and Desmond and like two others, they'll automatically get level ups regardless of if they're deployed or not. So because like there'll be like for those very few instant or battles where they're like forced onto the field, I guess it's like the developers are making sure like, hey, these people should be leveled up because we leveled them up for you. So you don't even have to deploy them to just like keep them built up. It kind of disincentivizes like deploying them because it's like, oh, it's just another slot I can just use to like level up someone else.
Level up someone else and then get the auto freebies for the story characters.
So it's a weird design decision on that end. And other than that, like the what you do in the games, like you go across this like world map. There's like nodes on the map, and then sometimes in towns you can go to an item shop. You can get more gear. You get a shit ton of money, in-game money in this game. So you never really have money problems, in my opinion. There's some side quests you can do as well. They don't really have much of a story. They have like a description of like what the side quest is, and then you go to that place. You go into a battle. You finish it, and then you just turn it in for rewards. Very, very basic stuff. Sometimes from side quests you can get like some good gear from them. Sometimes you'll get like these medals which you can use at at another shop in the game, and these medals are very, very basic, right? Like you can use these medals to like respec like your story characters if you want to put them in a different class entirely, or if you can use these medals to like get discounts at the shop, so you permanently lower the price of like things that you're able to buy, and then raise the price of things that you sell. Just very basic stuff like that. What else? That's kind of the game in a nutshell, to be honest. Like it's a very basic, functional, semi-competent strategy RPG. But these are very, very talented developers. And of course, like the look of the game is very, very novel. Like when you look at like the human portraits and the animal portraits, like it's a very Art Nouveau type of art style. The very distinct look to it all. And I think my favorite part about like the visual style was like it was even like the facial expressions they're able to make with their pixel art. Like it's very obvious like what the direction of a scene is going to be based on like the expressions that characters make in a scene before like anything is even uttered, which is pretty impressive. Like when you can see like someone is like scheming or has like a conniving sort of like look when they kind of like droop their like eyes, even in pixel art, you can tell like, oh, the direction of the scene's not going to be a great one. Like something bad's going to happen in the scene. So being able to like convey that with pixel art is pretty good, especially for like your debut project. That's probably one of its like hidden strengths in it, I'd say. So that's pretty awesome. And like and other than that, like it has a pretty distinct soundtrack compared to like what you're looking at. Like like with things like Tactics Ogre and Final Fantasy Tactics, it's a very sort of fantasy style, like lots of trombones, lots of trumpets, lots of like triumphant sort of like resounding noises coming from wind instruments. While this one takes a more jazz approach to it all. It's a lot of saxophone usage in this one. So it's
how long is it?
It's 12 hours. It took me 12 hours, just about 12 hours to finish. So I didn't know like the price of the game, but like I guess they're selling this for a launch discount for like I think $25, but the original price is like $30. I'm like, that's a lot. Getting to the price discussion is always weird, but for me, it's like that's a lot of money for It's not a bad like an awful game, but it's just like that's a high price tag. So I didn't know that until like they actually started selling it. And also like I was kind of browsing through the Steam forums, and people were asking how long it was, and like some of the developers like, oh, it's like 25 to 30 hours. I'm like, I don't know, man. I beat it in 12 hours with all the side quests, and this was like on like the hardest difficulty, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty typical that we see times kind of overestimated from publishers, so I mean I can't really blame them for it.
Yeah.
Though for a strategy game, I always kind of expect that those just have a little bit slower pace in general, like deliberately so. So the fact that it's still that short just tells me like how many battles did you do? Or are they just very short?
I did like over 40 battles because like it's easy to keep counting like the levels of people, right?
Right.
But once again, I found a strategy that made battles pretty fucking fast. So that's you got to factor in. Like I found a team composition and stuck with it because it was so time efficient and like ridiculously broken.
And so. I'm kind of multiple minds of that too. Like every single, I won't say every single, so many strategy games, whether they're like strategy RPGs, grid based, or they're dungeon crawlers or whatever, there will be broken. Like you can't perfectly balance everything. You can't have it without these things are more effective, more efficient than other things. But the fact that you stumbled on it so easily and never were like required to change your like approach just seems kind of like unfortunate.
Yeah, I also mentioned that too. Like, I'm fine with finding like stupid fucking things in strategy RPGs to like kind of rip the game wide open. I just wish that there was like other different scenarios in the game that like pushed you to think differently outside of that. Like that. I wish there was just like say like several maps or scenarios in the game that's like, oh, okay, definitely like, a range DPS will be trash at this map or at this section, you know. And it
just didn't happen.
Just didn't happen.
I don't mind it so much if it's like, oh, if you use class A with subclass B and make sure you have armor set C and use these abilities, then you have a really broken build. I don't really mind that because you had to go through the theory crafting to get to that point. It's a little bit less. I like a little bit less if it's just, you know, an I win button that works in every scenario. Like, oh, just use this class and you win. I know it's not quite like that, but basically, if you have to work towards some sort of build that's, quote, overpowered, I don't mind it so much. Rather than, you know, just archers with crossbows.
And you also kind of like bypassing a lot of mechanics because the game also has like elemental like reactions, like you inflict like a wet status on this person and use another spell and like it'll turn them, it'll make them freeze, or then like if you can like put them on fire and then you like and then you inflict a noxious elemental element on them when they're on fire, you'll make like an explosion reaction and it'll cause them to burn and all that. It's like there's other systems of the game that like theoretically might be very strong, but there's nothing really to like. There are other other avenues of the game that like this and like makes that process too much work because like instead of just like going through 3 steps to making like to making something maybe like do a little bit of damage, why don't I just like take the first step and just make everything explode immediately and do a fuck ton of damage, you know? Like one of the things that I came across early on is like, hey, look, the crossbow people have like a skill that fires a shot that not only has a huge attack modifier when you level it up, but it also pins the person in place upon hitting. It's like that's a weird thing to assign to a skill. Then when you promote them to hunter, it's like, oh, they have a companion, and they now have like a AoE move that you can instantly cast from very very far away, and it'll do more damage the more like you enhance like companion damage on their tree. And then there's like other skills that the hunter learns that are instant cast instead of the delayed action from like the ranger class that just like do a lot of damage as well and have like really stupid modifiers. It's like in my mind, it's like, why would you do anything else if you could just like kill things in like 1 or 2 shots instead of like and that's from step 1 instead of like taking 3 steps to maybe kill them in 3 hits, you know?
Yeah, the utility of those additional like statuses or strategies just isn't there when you can just do damage.
Yeah, and that, like if there was like if there was like actually like enemies in the game, like say there were elemental golems that like, hey, their skin is so tough that like the only doing like hitting them with arrows or just like or like unelement like or attached to no elemental anything on them will do like nearly no damage. So you have to really push to like, you know, experiment with the elemental system in the game to like take them down efficiently. that would solve some of it. Just like having different types of enemies that like are hard counters against it. Just the very basic example like that. It's like if there were like things about that game that like incorporated stuff like that, I would like appreciate it a lot more, and I would be like, oh, okay, that's actually a pretty cool like tactical strategy thing to like go about it and really push for like encourage different team compositions to like vary up approaches for certain enemies. But no.
Generalizing from that a bit, one thing that I kind of like treat as like not like a rule, but like a guideline or a heuristic is in your RPG, whether it's a strategy RPG or an action RPG or whatever, it's just like how useful is poison, or more generically, like how useful is our status ailments? Are like whenever you have a Final Fantasy game or any other like classic game where like every single boss is immune to every single status, to me that's almost just like disappointing. Like I want to have like some sort of enemy or boss where it's like the most effective way to beat this guy is to poison them, or to like at least take advantage of some sort of like elemental weakness. If they like make it so where just you figure out whatever roulette deals the highest DPS and you just repeat that. Unfortunately, that's just an easy trap to run into, and it's easier to say than it is to design. Like you said, like the work that these 2-3 developers have done, the fact that they got a game to market, got a publisher deal, got it, did the crowdfunding, all in itself is all admirable. And the fact that we're just saying like, well, the balance would be better if we did this and this is all stuff that they could take for their next project, whatever form or fashion that ends up looking like.
Yeah, I mean, like there are definitely like usability issues as well. Like I know a lot of like personally, it didn't bother me, but I could see how it bothers some other people's like the font choices in the game. Like a lot of people have a issue with the font choice. I'm like, okay, I can see that actually. Like I can see like for me, it didn't bother me, but like yeah, I can see how people can have a problem with that. Like some people have like a problem like using controller on the game. I actually used full keyboard on the game to navigate around because I like after a certain point I was like, I don't know, like using controller on this game is like not really as smooth as I want it to be. So, but I find like switching to keyboard, so I just kind of navigated like my troops and field just like using keyboard alone. And it's cool that they actually have like a full keyboard feature. Like you don't have to use the mouse at all with it, just keyboard alone, play the game. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a cool first attempt. I would really like to see, what their next project is and see where they go from here. I hope this does like feedback on this game doesn't deter them from like continuing to make other games. I'm sure they're gonna continue to work and improve this game and listen to the community and see what other things they can like to make it better. But also, I want them to also not get too down on like constructive feedback of like people who want to like this game, people and like this is all good because like there's all like feedback that like they can take into account. We're going to okay, where did we go wrong from this? What could we learn from this? Is there something like in our like in our process or like in our initial like or like in the conceptualization process, like we can look at things differently this time around, and understanding more of the realities of like going from like the like thinking up of a game, going through the process of making it, and like getting it to market. Like we've learned so many things from this process. Like what can we do better this time around to make that process more efficient, more smooth, stuff. So we'll see how it goes from here.
So the other game that I was teasing up here was a game that I know Adam spent some time over the last couple months playing. He had to step away from it a few times to play some other embargo titles, which we'll talk about in the future. But Adam, you've been preparing yourself for the upcoming Baldur's Gate 3, which comes out in less than a week.
Yep. So a long time being like 4 years ago or so, I started and played Baldur's Gate 1 because I had never played it, the classic Baldur's Gate, and I was just like, you know what, I should. And Baldur's Gate 1, I think, is a pretty good game, but getting into it is actually pretty tough. Like the early game, Baldur's Gate, low-level D&D mechanics, it's one of those RPGs where starting out, you kind of just suck at everything. And your group of like pathetic weaklings meets a group of direwolves, and you're going to get demolished. So anyways, I beat Baldur's Gate 1, and then I was basically like, all right, I should play Baldur's Gate 2 eventually, and
Well,
I
actually,
never got around to it.
before you move on to Baldur's Gate 2, I just want to say how much I do empathize with you feel weak as shit in Baldur's Gate 1. And it's in a way where it almost feels frustrating, where you're like, am I doing something wrong? Am I just dumb? Do I not know how to play games anymore? It's just the balance is so...
Gate 1. You were fighting wolves. You start out in the wilderness in Baldur's Gate 1, and wolves are some of the first things you fight. And no matter like what your class is, you find Jaheira and Khalid early on, and just like they're swinging their weapons at the wolves, and they're just like missing every single time. And you're just like, what am I? Is this the game? Like, I'm just sitting here hoping that they hit something. Like, come on, dudes. But yeah.
And when a character dies, you don't just throw Phoenix down on them and they're fine. It's a huge hassle to revive if you even can. I'm trying to remember.
I also have a question on that, like Fred, like for people who like are interested in like going to Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 2, like these days, is it like easy to like get running on like a modern PC without any hassle, or do you have to?
The enhanced editions, released by Beamdog like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, something like that. Those ones should work on any PC pretty no problem.
Okay.
And those versions also got ported to most platforms like Switch, Xbox, PlayStation 4. So to be honest, I can't imagine playing one of these games with a controller. I have no idea how that would even work.
Yeah.
You know, obviously these are PC games at heart, so they're keyboard mouse. You know, that's what they're designed for, literally. Anyways, so approaching Baldur's Gate 3 this year, I was like, wow, I better play Baldur's Gate 2. For those who may not be aware, Baldur's Gate 3 takes place, I think, like 100, 200 years after Baldur's Gate 2. And, you know, it's going to be situated in a sense where it's a starting point. You know, it's obviously a very different style of game from a different developer 20 years later. You don't need to play Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 to play 3, but I was just like, let me do it because I want to see those references. I want to learn more about the world and the histories and the places and so on and so forth. So about 6 weeks ago, I played, actually before I got to Baldur's Gate 2, I played Siege of Dragonspear, which, if you're not aware, Siege of Dragonspear is kind of an interquel mini game that takes place in between 1 and 2 that was developed by Beamdog. It doesn't have a great reputation. First of all, it's sort of like a filler arc in an anime because, you know, obviously everything that happens in that game can't be referenced in 2 because it came out afterwards. So on one hand, it's just sort of like, well, all these places I'm seeing and characters I'm meeting, none of them matter. It's okay. It's fine. It's a little bit of a weird structure. It's not great.
I remember when I played Siege of Dragonspear, the thing that was most strange about it is that obviously Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2 are the classic quintessential CRPG, which I know that term has grown to mean different things to different people like any other RPG genre. But it's a party of 5 to 6 characters with a classic real-time with pause system. So you have like your traditional D&D. Yeah, you have your traditional D&D party where you'll have a few frontliners, you'll have a couple mages. You'll likely have one character who specializes at support of some sort, whether it's healing or bard or something. But then in Siege of Dragonspear, they do this thing where you have your regular party, but they do this thing where it's almost like tactics adjacent. They're like, well, what if you have a bunch of other like soldiers or mooks with you and they also fight? And it's like, wait, what? Like, that's fine, but does that work in this sort of game? And I think Siege of Dragonspear kind of answers, not really. I mean, it doesn't. It's not broken, but it's just strange.
Yeah, like the final battle of Siege of Dragonspear is, you guessed it, the Siege of Dragonspear, which is a castle, and you have like your party of 6, and then there's like literally 20 other NPC dudes fighting for you, and you're fighting like 40 enemies. Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, you're never fighting like that many enemies. Very rarely are you fighting that many enemies, and even if you are, it's like they're usually like really
intended to be like fodder.
Yeah. It sort of becomes like a weird pseudo RTS game where you have literally dozens of allies and dozens of enemies, and it's awkward. But and then the story is kind of whatever, and you know, it's fine. I played it just out of obligation. It's not bad. Like, it's got the same sort of mechanics. It's got some quests that are, you know, rewarding and whatnot. It's not necessary. Anyways, Baldur's Gate 2. So Baldur's Gate 2, it opens up very differently than 1. You go through a little tutorial area, but then after that, you're basically you're dropped into a city. And then in the city, you're just going to stumble across side quests, characters, sub-events, companions, people from Baldur's Gate 1, new characters, new companions, all over the place. You're basically tripping over all these different events that are going on. And it's the sort of thing where you get you're like, oh, this character mentioned this thing in the graveyard. Let me head that way. And then you get distracted by another character mentioning another thing, somewhere else. And that's a different quest line with a different character. I think there's literally like 15 companions that you can bump into. They each have a quest or two. So there's a lot. And there's this density to like kind of overlapping little quests and stories that I really appreciated. And most importantly, I imported my Baldur's Gate 1 character. I think your allies kind of reset no matter what, unless you're using a mod of some sort, which I didn't. But you don't feel weak as shit. It feels more natural in terms of, oh, okay, I'm this level. I can do these, early entry level quests and fights, and then you gain better weapons and equipment to do the higher level stuff. And it's much easier to get into. I know people have made arguments that just like low level D&D just doesn't work in a computer game. I don't know. It at least didn't implement it very well here. And I know D&D rules have changed a lot in 20 years, but it's a lot easier to get into Baldur's Gate 2 than 1. And I thought a lot of I thought the main story premise, it's relatively simple on its face. You basically are kidnapped by some dude with magic. I know classic RPG fans don't need me to explain the plot of Baldur's Gate 2. But I'm sure there's a lot of newer RPG players that haven't played these. This dude who's like a magician, I guess, you don't know when you're first playing the game, captures you and does something to you. And then some events happen, and basically he and your character's sister, whose name is Eiyuden, are basically kidnapped, and you need to go basically find him and save her. And that's basically the initial premise. But then there's all these different side events and side stories and quests that are taking place that are pretty cool and pretty interesting, both from a story viewpoint as well as just the sort of fight you're doing, the sort of equipment you have, the equipment you find, the looting aspect of it. It's pretty fun and engaging. And like I said, it's much easier to get into. And overall, the structure of the game was maybe a little bit unexpected to me. You can spend a lot of time. This is chapter 2 and all this stuff happens. If you want, you can spend a lot of time, like 30, 40 hours just doing side quests. It's like a side quest game. It's sort of in a loose way kind of reminded me of like Mass Effect 2, where like you have a main story, but really the whole point of the game is all the other stuff you can do, which is not technically the main story, but you should do it. And then I actually felt that the way the main story kind of unfolded, it actually was sort of at a level that I kind of liked in terms of the escalation of the conflict, learning out who the villain is, and basically the plot points that get to that point and how it concludes. I actually thought it was pretty well done. After that, there's an expansion to Baldur's Gate 2 called Throne of Baal. I didn't really care for this as much. What did you think of Throne of Baal, Brian?
I'll be honest. So I had played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 not that long ago. It was like 4 to 5 years ago. But enough where like I remember when Adam was playing through it, I was like, what's he gonna think about the reveals at the Elven Village or about the antagonist of 2? But then when I was thinking of Throne of Baal, the expansion, I found that just I had latched on to less of it. Like my memory was much foggier because there was just a lot less there, like that didn't leave as much of an impression on me. There's a certain character that is a party member in the expansion that I remembered very clearly, but I had almost forgotten the last antagonist until I was watching Adam play. Like, oh yeah, I remember this battlefield. Oh yeah, I remember this person. But like it just unlike John Arenicus, the antagonist of the expansion, it was like on the fringes of my memory. Like, oh yeah, this person was a thing.
Yeah. So long story short, I felt the plot and the villain and the conflict in Baldur's Gate 2, like you said, I thought it was pretty well done and I kind of attached to it and I'll probably remember it. Throne of Ball, it quite literally is just like, you are a ball spawn. You have the power of a god. Are you going to use it for good or evil? And you must defeat the other ball spawns to claim your throne or not. And it just kind of feels because kind of like, I don't care about this. Like, it's not interesting. Like, it really, really kind of hammers like heavily. Are you going to be a good, you have divine powers. That's not really a spoiler. That's your character. Are you going to use them for good or evil? Ooh, I'm just like, I don't care.
And
Like, this is so trite.
And not only that, but like obviously Baldur's Gate 1, the thing that feels so different about Baldur's Gate 1 versus 2 is in Baldur's Gate 1, you don't go to the city of Baldur's Gate until like the last act of the game. So it feels very like upside down in that way.
Yes.
Where in the second game you have your access to on the Sword Coast. I mean, I guess you said it was chapter 2, not chapter 1, but early on. And
is the country, Athkala is the city.
Oh, okay.
If I remember.
But then if I remember right, in the expansion, it's basically a giant dungeon splunking.
Yes.
Like you have like a little hub area. If I remember right, it's like a pillar of fire.
It's a pocket portal. It's a pocket portal of hell.
And then like all your characters stand in like a circle and you just kind of go around and you can talk to them. And it's not bad. It's just a lot less interesting than having like this expansive city.
Sprawling, lively city. Yeah. So it kind of makes more sense. Well, I had played Baldur's Gate 1, but that Larian Studios released a trailer that was basically just, here's what Baldur's Gate looks like. And I know a lot of people latched onto that because it's kind of like, this is the main hub of the game. This is where like all the action takes place. We hope there's going to be a bunch of quests, a bunch of characters, a bunch of events, a bunch of overlapping storylines that take place there, which is kind of what happens in both Baldur's Gate in the first game and Athkala in the second game. So yeah, I beat that game earlier this week, Baldur's Gate 2 and Throne of Ball. And so I know Baldur's Gate 3 takes place a couple hundred years later, but I'm assuming there's going to be some references to people, places, things, events. Minx is in the game somehow.
I always forget that. I'm like, why? I still try to wrap my head around.
I gather one of the tabletop like campaigns that is D&D Baldur's Gate explains it.
So before
like he petrified himself.
Before I played Baldur's Gate 1, I had seen I'd heard of Minx. I had seen people use him as like profile pics on forums on Twitter or whatever. I heard about his hamster or his rat or whatever. I'm like, oh, who is this like popular Baldur's Gate character? Like who? And then I'll be honest, when I played the games, like he is very
kind of annoying.
I can name many other characters more than Minx that are a lot more interesting.
Minx is kind of just like he's like a gimmicky like he's got like a very surface level gimmicky goofy personality, but that's about it.
I'm trying to think like of a good analog, but I really can't. He's not good. I don't like Minx. There, I'll just leave it like that.
It's definitely a character of an era type of deal. Like you just like try to take it into the context of like when those games came out. It's like, oh, that's funny that like a game can make you smile like this. Mm-hmm. Sort of thing like that.
One of Minx's sort of companion things in Baldur's Gate 2 is he's trying to convince you that Boo, who is his hamster, is actually a giant hamster from space.
Hell yeah.
That's the type of humor it is. He's like, he's actually a space hamster and he's actually a giant. It's like, okay, Minx, whatever you say.
So for obviously there's be a lot of people new to Baldur's Gate with Baldur's Gate 3. Some of them might be more familiar with like RPGs like the Divinity series. For people who may decide to try out those earlier games either after playing Baldur's Gate 3 or maybe a little bit before, like I guess just general advice from both of you, from the framework of like, hey, these people are probably more used to modern RPGs, probably coming from the games like Divinity. Like, what are like some like just very surface level beginner tips?
I know this from when people tried to play. It's sort of funny because to me it feels sort of natural, but people playing modern RPGs, it's kind of amusing seeing them like get introduced to these sort of systems. So the game that BioWare made after Baldur's Gate was Knights of the Old Republic, and that came out relatively recently for like Switch, and because it was ported. And I remember actually, I think it was Cullen playing it, and he like was sort of flabbergasted and confused about how the dice roll combat worked, where your character starts swinging at your foe in front of you, but the animation of if your lightsaber hits their model doesn't matter at all, and it's not a turn-based system. You don't, he just starts swinging, and sometimes you hit and sometimes you miss because there's invisible dice rolls that are taking place in terms of your aiming and their dodging. And like to me, that's just like mechanics. Like, oh, okay, that's the mechanics of the game. And obviously those similar mechanics, dice rolls, are in Baldur's Gate. So it's a real time with pause system. It's, Knights of the Old Republic sort of has that real time with pause, just with a different perspective. And so I know some people argue that Baldur's Gate is a good game despite that, where like real time with pause just cannot be a good system no matter what you do. It's just inherently flawed, which I'm not going to argue against it, but I don't maybe think that strongly against it. But it's the sort of game where you have to kind of just get used to that sort of, you tell your characters what to do and then they'll start doing it. But then there's all this, RNG in the background in terms of, do they hit? Do they not? Is it a critical hit? You don't actually, there's no turns. So you're not like choosing now on this action, you're doing this one thing. And on this action, you're doing another thing. They're just going to start doing a thing over and over until you tell them to do something else. Mm-hmm. So it does take a little bit of getting used to.
Yeah. So people who are like modern players are like, who are used to like models colliding. And then because those models collided, that should hit. Like that doesn't apply here because of that. Okay.
And then, but the thing is, of course, is that Baldur's Gate 3 does not have this sort of system at all. It's turn-based. And from what I can tell, it's pretty much pure turn-based. Like you can argue, like, I don't quite remember if characters move individually, or do you have like a round where you can move your characters in a round and then the enemies get a turn, is it round-based, is it turn-based, whatever. But it's not real-time with pause, for sure.
Well, I remember when I played, but not only like the Divinity games, which are turn-based, but played the early access of Baldur's Gate 3 in 2020, and like you, I don't quite remember if it was pure turn-based or round-based or phase-based, all the different, but it was not real-time with pause. But then I've also played games like Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, where I forget if it was at launch or post-launch, but that game has a turn-based toggle. You can choose real-time with pause or turn-based. And when I would play Baldur's Gate or when I would play Divinity, at the time I would say, well, turn-based, I like having that level of control. I like having that level of pace. I like being able to know exactly what's going on rather than having all 6 of my characters acting at the same time and kind of having to like pause and toggle between them. It feels a lot sloppier. However, once I played Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, and then also the second Pillars of Eternity game, has the option. Again, I forget if it was at launch or a post. I think it was a post edition.
One of these games had like a fan mod for turn-based, and then it was like adopted or something.
It was eventually blessed. But Deadfire, I played real-time with pause because I believe at the time that's the only option I had. But Wrath of the Righteous, I had the option to play in turn-based, and there's actually there's a part in that game where you're fighting against like a master tactician where you're forced to use turn-based because that's kind of like the gimmick. Like how you're on a chessboard now. And I remember when I played that, I was like, dear God, this is so slow.
I remember people making that same argument where they're like, yeah, I want turn-based. And then they realize, oh, wow, this is way slower than real-time with pause.
But I will say it's nice to be able to toggle between them, because if you're fighting like Trash, where you can kind of give a few general inputs, use your strongest skills, everyone else can kind of just act on their own behalf, and then you can clear the fight pretty quickly. Real-time with pause is perfect. But if it's like okay, this is a boss fight, I'm under-leveled, I need to make sure I do things in the right way, in the right order, slowing down and going turn-based is good. It's kind of a moot point, because in Baldur's Gate 3, turn-based is your only option, and it's calibrated around that. So if anything, this would be almost going the other way, because in both Pathfinder and Deadfire's case, designed as real-time with pause games, where then turn-based was added afterwards, or at least developed afterwards, where this game is obviously being developed with turn-based in mind. So I'm guessing won't feel quite as slow in that respect, because I don't remember playing through the Divinity games thinking that those are slow either. And I do know people who have played the Divinity games and played Baldur's Gate 3's early access, like, this feels just like Divinity game in the skin of a D&D Sword Coast game, and that's kind of true. It's been a few years since I played the early access. Does it feel like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2? Maybe not, but it is a different developer 20 years later. It was always going to feel somewhat different.
Yeah, and I mean, even if BioWare was doing Baldur's Gate 3, I'm going to guess that 95% of that staff isn't there anymore.
Right.
Definitely not the doctors. They're not there anymore.
Same sort of thing with like the it's a very different style of game, but like hell yeah, Retro Studios is making Metroid Prime 4, but it's like how much of that is actually like the same talent? Who knows? So
But yeah, so I'm all ready for Baldur's Gate 3 next week.
Well, no, you gotta play the Divinity games.
The Divinity game. Yeah, I haven't played a Divinity game.
You've got 5 days.
I better get all of those Divinity games done in the next 5 days. Okay.
The Divinity games are the sorts of games where if I could freeze time and just be like, I'm gonna freeze time and play through a game in my hyperbolic time chamber or room of spirited time or whatever, I would play through Divinity 2 again. But I also know it's like a 150-hour commitment. Even if you rush through it, I think it's like a 60-hour commitment. So I'm like, great game, you only play it once.
Just as a side comment, I remember like before Original Sin 1 came out, I remember the Divinity games, there were several of them, but they were never like, how do I put this? Just Original Sin 1 was sort of like kind of like a breakout. I'm looking for like a breakout, and 2 even more so, but only partially because 1 had good reception. I just remember the Divinity games before that. It was just like, oh, here's another European tactical RPG that's okay, I guess. And I'm sure those games have their fans, but it kind of just exploded with Original Sin, like for sure.
I'm not sure. I wish
now Larian Studios has like 6 different studios worldwide or something like that.
I wish I had the history on hand to know why, like what contributed to Original Sin 1 being the breakout hit that it was. And I don't like, I'm sure you could research this and figure it out, but I haven't. The fact that it was on some sort of crowdfunding service. I forget if it was Kickstarter or another one of those. And then I know Divinity Original Sin 2 had early access window as well. I'm not sure if early access was in quite as formalized a space for 1, but it's probably a combination of those things that helped contribute to it being a breakout hit, plus just the word of mouth from the original games. And at some point between playing Original Sin 1 and 2, I did grab all the other Divinity games, but I just haven't had time to get to them. They're kind of like
they're in my Steam library. I just need a time to play them.
Kind of like what you did with Baldur's Gate. Like if they ever, I'm sure they will. They will. Divinity has been a really good IP for them. They will return to Divinity at some point. Maybe at that point, be like, all right, I will play the original Divinity games, and then I'll even play like that Dragon Commander tactical one, like just to know my bases and get ready for whatever Divinity Original Sin 4 or whatever.
Skipping 3?
3. Yeah, sorry.
For Baldur's Gate 3, I guess I didn't like pre-order it or like buy it yet or anything. How is like everything working? Like for people who buy what Baldur's Gate 3 is not downloaded, like will the game just like auto update into the full version?
Yeah, and they even said on Twitter, saves will not be compatible. So if you can't just go ahead and buy it now. If you wanted to, you could buy it now and play part of it now, but in less than a week, your save, if you update it, will not load.
Is it one of those things where
like, an early start?
Is it one of those games where like the there's like a discount for it because it's an early access, and then like there's the portal
discount, but you get like bonus stuff.
Let me pull up the Steam page. No, right now
if you buy it now, you get a special dice skin, because that game actually shows like your dice rolls.
Oh yeah.
I mean, dice good.
As of right now, it's full price even for early access. Well, I guess it's $59.99, which I think is full price. But
so it's not a $70 game.
Remember when PC games were $50, and then someone else would be like, "Remember when PC games were $20?" Yeah, but it's not a $70 game at least. Will it be once it's on PS5? I don't know.
Okay, all right. So maybe the call is like, hey, just buy it and then maybe just like download it when it goes live or something.
Yeah. If you're planning on playing it, you might as well buy it early because you get some bonus stuff. but you can't. You can play it early. Just there's no really no point.
Well, I mean, you could learn like about your class because that way you're not like have choice paralysis at the character creator. Yeah. So
randomize everything.
We'll talk about this more next week, I'm sure. All of whoever's starting Baldur's Gate 3. I feel like this game is sort of coming out at a good time because there's sort of been a dearth of this sort of Western style RPG. Like we've gotten, Outer Worlds a couple years ago, and we've gotten,
Cyberpunk.
Cyberpunk, but that's sort of a different style. Like, and then you have to go to like these smaller studios like Greedfall a couple years ago. So my point is, there's just kind of been a dearth of this sort of RPG, which is like third person. This one's more tactical than maybe a BioWare game, but it's got like romance options in it, which I know a lot of people are big fans of that, which some other games didn't have so much of that. Like I know Starfield supposedly doesn't really have romance, and those Bethesda RPGs are kind of different beasts anyway. So I kind of feel like I've seen a lot of people who are maybe not necessarily fans of, like Larian and Divinity games, but maybe fan of like Dragon Age or Mass Effect, BioWare style RPGs are interested in this because it's been a long time since we've had a BioWare style RPG. I mean, there was Andromeda, which was sort of mixed reaction, and that was 5 years ago.
Like 2015 to 2019, maybe 2020, you had a few options. Like maybe even before that, like 2012, 2013, 2014, like you had the Shadowrun games. You had, of course, both Pillars games. You had
well, those are the CRPGs. I was talking more about like the BioWare style Western RPG.
Which I guess used to do. And I guess I know you had like Wasteland 3 a few years back, but yeah, 2020, 2021, 2022, and I'm sure we're missing one. If your favorite Western RPG came out in 2021, remind us. But it just seems like it's been quieter on that front for the last couple of years, and now it feels like with Baldur's Gate 3 and Starfield, which people are kind of like oddly like pinning against each other, even though I feel like they're very different sorts of games, despite both being Western RPGs. Feels like I don't think it really does them a lot of service to pin them against each other, but people will. But finally feels like we're kind of back in that space. And of course, I know like BioWare has had some momentum for their new Dragon Age, Dreadwolf, and whatever their Mass Effect project is, but still a few years out from that. Then, of course, Avowed and in Exile's new game, etc.
I think it's just like this year has like just seems like a very strong year for Western RPGs, like just for big significant ones. Like even outside of like upcoming Starfield and Baldur's Gate, you have Remnant 2, Jagged Alliance 3,
Diablo. I mean, Diablo has some issues.
I mean, arguably Diablo is a big Western RPG.
Yeah, I mean, you can't deny it.
Yeah, for sure. But like not really a RPG, but like Jedi Survivor.
It is sort of funny that I know the PC release of Baldur's Gate is next week, but then like you have Baldur's Gate is sort of a PlayStation exclusive as far as consoles go, and then Starfield is an Xbox exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that really matters, but I'm sure there'll be somewhere on the corner of the internet
they'll both be installed on a PC, and then I'll be like, oh god, these are going to take 100 hours to fucking get through.
Yeah,
I'll be trying to like how hyped are you for Baldur's Gate 3? Like I am excited to play Baldur's Gate 3, but also like god, this is going to take 150 hours.
Yeah, burn game for me. Yeah, like I'll definitely play it like in spurts, but I'm not gonna be marathoning it like something. Like I have friends like I have like a 4 or 5 day weekend planned just for like Godspeed, dude.
Yeah, I'm almost looking out at like what else is coming out in August, and I'm like, man, what am I gonna have to ignore if I want to get through Baldur's Gate?
I'm sorry, but like Baldur's Gate and Starfield die as soon as Armored Core comes out for me. Those games are on the. I'm dropping both of them for a good bit, and just
my whole Armored Core is before Starfield, so
yeah. But
I am touching Starfield until I have my Armored Core fill.
I need it. There were previews, including us, that came out this week, and I've just been digesting a lot of Armored Core info. Like everything I've been reading and seeing, I'm like, I need it.
And now I guess we will pivot to the game that I added to the list very late. This game that I brought up to Chow earlier and didn't know what it was. You have listed here, Chow, 2 games: Detention and Lost Epic.
Detention is a side-scroller horror point-and-click adventure game. how do I describe this game? It's made by a Taiwanese studio called Red Candle Games. There was also, I think, Playism did like some of the Western release. I
Oh,
think.
I remember hearing about this game because of what was it? The like because they're Taiwanese and they had like Taiwanese support. Their games were like delisted in China or something like that.
Well, this story has a
Look it up.
lot to do with like was it like communism era where like okay, so uh in the setting here, it's basically during the White Terror. If you're familiar with Asian history, this is like after the Chinese Civil War. Was it the people that like the side that lost became Taiwan, and during that time, you'll be if you have any like communist type views, the secret police is going to go after you, and they're going to execute you or beat the shit out of you until you confess that you're a communist. Basically, it's in that era, basically.
Adam,
And
Ancho, I pulled it up and now it's ringing a bell. Adam, you're almost right. So the same developers released a game called Devotion, which was removed from Steam, but they also had Detention. Like they made Detention preceded that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I had forgotten that too, but it is ringing a bell now that I kind of read back up on it. All right, continue, Joe.
I was gonna say, so it takes place in that era, and it becomes a very key element in this story. This game is very simple, very short. You could probably beat it in one sitting, which I did with a friend, because he basically told me to play this because we're gonna play an old PS1 game and try to understand if there was any inspired elements from that PS1 game.
Which PS1 game?
It's called Twilight Syndrome.
That brings a bell, actually.
It's not Edward Cullen, guys. This is way before.
Oh,
Yeah,
Twilight.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that is also like a side scroller, kind of like horror game, and you know it's old when you get was it Kikugo Inui as the main character as the voice actress.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's also like a side scroller horror that takes place in high school, and we just want, and he's like, oh, you should play Detention. It's like maybe we get some ideas from it. And yeah, this game was actually like great. I don't want to spoil too much details in the story because the key element is the story of this game, but how the story is told is very vague, and you don't really have all the plot elements. But I was able to. It was told simple enough that you were able to get like 90% of it right. Because when I like after I finished the game, I read the wiki. I'm like, oh, I got basically all the details right, even though they barely tell you anything. It's just like little words, and a lot of things are just done through symbolism. Kind of like I hate doing the comparison. You know, everything's comparing to Dark Souls now, where the story doesn't tell you like straight up, and then at the end you try to piece things together, and depending on how much you make that connection, is kind of like how much your understanding of the story is. And
well, the fact that you're using Dark Souls as a comparison based on the way it delivers its story, I think is a little bit less trite of a comparison rather than just like stamina based action gameplay.
You mean basically like snipping or like piecing together different like lore snippets or things you read and maybe environmental storytelling into like, oh, okay, here's the actual plot of the game, not told to me, explicitly.
Yeah, that's how the game goes. Like it starts out like really strange. You play as this guy, and he falls asleep in class. Then he wakes up, and the school has completely changed. Transformed into this nightmarish kind of like setting. It's like it starts to rain blood. It starts to do this, and starting to see like ghosts. Like it just gets all fucked up. And he finds a girl, and then he wakes her up, and suddenly like the story will change into her perspective, and she will be the protagonist from now on. And that guy is no longer there. And there's like the horror elements is kind of there, but it's not like. I feel like every chapter the gameplay is kind of different. Like it starts out like a horror game at the first two chapters, and the last two chapters is just like a straight up puzzle game over and the horror elements all disappeared, right? I mean, it's still scary, but it's less focused on the horror. It's kind of like focused on the protagonist's mental state, which is the girl that you switch your point of view with later on, like just after a prologue. And yeah, like the story is the best part of this game, but yet I don't really want to like reveal too much details of the story. It's like it'll probably ruin the experience if I tell you exactly what happens.
Don't talk don't tell us the story just in case. But yeah, I mean, it's a game that came out like what, and for people
6 years, it's like 6 years ago.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, for people who want to check it out, just go check it out. So it sounds pretty interesting. I think it's pretty like for me, it's a pretty interesting like point of like you're using this like sort of like an anchor point before you go to dive into Twilight Syndrome on PS1 and seeing like, hey, like kind of doing your own investigation of like were there elements here that like that the developers of the Detention shared, or like did they potentially look into Twilight Syndrome first before developing this game? I think that's a pretty interesting like way to go about it.
Like Twilight Syndrome. We haven't like completely started Twilight Syndrome yet, but that's developed by was it Human Entertainment? Spike. Yeah, I'm not sure if you can. This is that like Spike Chunsoft before they start doing Danganronpa games? Really?
Yeah, that was very very early for them.
Yeah. So it's an earlier project from them. So, but we'll be interested to check it out to see where it goes, because like we're just going through a whole process of playing visual novels right now. So,
White Album's almost out too, Chow. It's around the corner.
Don't worry, I'll finish that. Even though I don't really like the first one that much, all I care is about the second one. I'm just buying it so the second one can come out.
So yeah, you also were playing another game, Lost Epic, and this is like a indie game, like a side-scrolling action indie game that like it was an early access for quite a bit, and then they finally released it in its full release like I think last year. I forgot.
Yeah, last year July, and then they've made like several, like they've taken community feedback and improved the game, and then they did another like release around April for like mainstream consoles like Switch and like PS5 and stuff.
Yeah, this is this is the team behind what were like Earth Wars, right?
I'm not quite sure who the team is behind it.
Okay,
so yeah, Team Earth Vars or Earth Wars or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was sort of like also like a side-scrolling action game too, but that was like released way like several years ago.
Yeah, I actually never heard of that one, but maybe I should check that one out too.
I think it's one of those things that like it got like a rename, like it was Earth's Dawn or Earth Wars before, and then Earth's Dawn, and because there's some copyright issue with the name, so it gets all wonky with the name. But yeah, this one actually been like I never got around to it. I would like to, but like tell me how it is. Like what's up with Lost Epic?
So Lost Epic is basically, what if you took Odin Sphere and make it a Dark Souls game?
Okay.
Dark Souls. Yeah, I know. I hate this comparison, but this game has.
Don't worry, soon we'll compare it all to Lords of the Fallen.
Soon we'll compare it all to Armored Core.
Okay, there you go.
I'm sorry, guys. I have become official game journalist now when you compare everything to Dark Souls.
There you go.
Okay, so all right, so yeah, but when I see footage of this game, I think of like almost like a vanillaware game.
Yeah, so. Basically in the beginning of the game, you create an avatar, or not exactly an avatar. You play this shadowy figure to do this tutorial on the combat, and then after the combat's over, you get to create an avatar, and like how the character is dressed, or like the armor that you equip is how your character appearance will look like. So every item that you find in this game will change your character's appearance, right?
Always fun.
And the other thing is that you also get to set the voice of the character that you're playing. I think one of the things that pisses off people in this game is that if you collect a certain amount of spirits, your character voice changes for some reason. I think it's part of lore reasons. That helps a lot of people. Is like, I like the voice the way I said it to it. You suddenly just
that's a pretty funny like twist on these where like you pick a voice, but then over time because of narrative reasons, their voice changes.
And yeah, this is kind of the thing that pisses off the community. It's like, is there a way that I could change back the voice or something? It's like, because this is not what was my intention, right?
Okay.
But anyways, after you create your avatar, it's like you get like kind of like a lore dump from this witch, which tells you like kind of like you must go kill the gods or something, because they basically drained all the resources of this world that they live in, and then the game just kind of starts up from there, and it has like nothing but like Dark Souls systems. Like if you die, like all like the gems that you collected, which is used for leveling up purposes and unlocking other stuff, is like it's gone where to the last place where you died, so you had to run back and collect them.
Mm-hmm.
Are there campfires that respawn enemies, and you can also use them there? And then there's also like you have like healing flasks that you can that you refill at these campfires.
Well, you don't get healing flask. You get to make potions with your EXP points, or whatever the gems is called, and then you save by finding like a statue of like one of goddess statues, I think, and you could get its blessing to level up. But that's where you also save it as well.
That was stolen from Zelda. I'm just kidding.
Damn, game ripped off everything. But the leveling up system is like, was it? It kind of reminds me of FF12 with the license board. It's like you get this giant, like kind of like a sphere grid looking board thing, and you level up, and then you could go to that point in the book, which raises your stats. And there is also like secret like monuments that you can find that would unlock certain parts of the board, and that will let you access like later on places or places that you revisit later on. Like, let's just say there's a wall that you can't break. If you find a monument to get this like passive ability, that lets your skills to like break it, right? Like stuff like that. And what was the other thing with this game is the combat feels kind of easy in my opinion. It's like every time was it you get a divine.
So it's not like Dark Souls. joking.
Who knows? Maybe you might be a Dark Souls master. Who knows? I don't know, but like the combat is like every time when you fight like a monster, right? There is like if they use like a special ability, there is either a red exclamation mark or a yellow one. If it's a yellow one, you can use your divine skill to like counter it. And when you counter it, they're like temporary stagger, and you can like kind of like backstab them, right? Sort of thing. Like, you know, I call it a backstab. You see your character like front stab, and the sound effect is like so over the top. So it's like you're like spamming does not stop, and you're like not sure if you did the parry correctly or you're just like it's just that.
Yeah,
easy
this sort of mechanic you've seen before, where it's like certain abilities have a tell that you can counter, and then there's certain abilities that are basically just like you cannot counter this, so you better get out of the way. So.
Yeah, but
just like John
Sekiro?
from Software,
just like Sekiro.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like I think it's pretty good. I'm not saying it's like perfect at all. It's like it's definitely like good from what I experienced for the first couple hours. What was the other thing I tried to remember in the game? Soundtrack's great. I didn't have a problem with the soundtrack. It does get a little kind of confusing on what to do, because since this is kind of like it's a small indie title, so if you ever get lost in this game, there's hardly any guides on this game because no one really did much guides to cover this game.
Well, I mean, you could be that person, Zhao.
No,
No.
Why was it always me?
I mean, when I think of someone who like steps up to the plate for playthroughs and FAQs and everything.
Damn.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Chow, did you cover Kuro? Am I gonna have a guide to follow when that comes out?
I did write a Kuro guide.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
It's under NDA, so I already broke NDA by saying that I did.
Nice.
Oh,
well,
okay. Well, if you need me to snip this out, let me know. No one listens to this anyway. No worries.
They'll never know.
Your secret safe. Anyways, Lost Epic. No guides exist. There's an opportunity there.
Yeah, you can always pitch a Chow.
No, not now.
No.
Oh my god. Do you recommend this for people who don't like Dark Souls?
Yes, because it's not Dark Souls.
Okay.
It's more Elden Sphere than Dark Souls.
This also has co-op, right? You can play like with
Yeah, there's
another
co-op,
person.
but
Okay.
I haven't tried the co-op function. I just heard on the internet it's from my reading the forum, it is extremely fun to do co-op in this game, but
Uh-huh.
to get it working is a different issue. So
Okay.
it's always like, oh, can I find the players to help me? It's like, I don't know. It's like if it does, it's like, yeah, it's great, but uh that's kind of like what I got from the forums from the people that used it. It works when it works.
Did you finish this or still working through it?
I'm still working through it. I heard it's not I heard it's not too long. I heard the game's only about 10 hours long compared to like some other games that I know. These days is like it's good to have a 10-hour game, not like dealing with 150 hours RPGs all the time.
What are you talking about, man?
I want a 10-hour Baldur's Gate game.
Oh, dude, don't say that. People would get so pissed. Holy shit.
Look, I'm still too traumatized about playing Persona 5 for a guide and beating it 4 times, and this is a
Oh,
stupid
that's yeah. That's
100.
that's a bad way to go.
I have Persona 5 perpetually installed on my PC because
This is why I
eventually
still
I
refuse
will
to
play
touch
it.
Boyo.
Yeah, you'll start it up and they announce Persona 6. Like, all right, now it's time to understand
No,
Persona
no,
6.
no, you can't make Persona 6 until there's a Persona 5 fighting game, okay?
Oh.
Hmm, I don't know.
They
Maybe.
make a spin-off of Persona 4 of everything until they ran out of ideas. Like, we can't make any more spin-offs.
Well,
This
We
is
got a
Persona 4,
tactics game coming.
yeah, Persona 4 never got a tactical RPG.
Yeah,
Checkmate. There you go.
there you go.
But
Okay.
yeah, I agree. I agree with the sentiment that yes, 10, 20-hour RPGs are great, or even just games in general. I should expand my horizons and play fewer RPGs. How long do you think Armored Core 6 will be?
25 hours.
Ooh, depends actually. Like, it depends on what you want from it, right? Like,
Depends on
are
how
you
much time you spend creating
are
your
you
mech.
are you doing it for like just one playthrough, or are you actually gonna do like, are you gonna do like another playthrough to like see other scenarios that you didn't see before? Are you trying to collect all the parts?
I
I
remember
mean,
the old games. It's like if you beat it and do New Game Plus, like you get to replay all the levels, and they have like different pilots and level layouts. So it's like almost a different game and altogether.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I
So
forgot
it's
what
actually
preview I saw, but some preview was saying that like Armored Core 6 has sorties. I don't know if they're called sorties in game that are like 2 to 4 minutes long, and that was strange. But I'm trying to remember. I've played For Answer and I've played one of the Armored Core 2s, and like yeah, a couple of the sorties were just like 2 minutes long. Like some of them were just go
like
here
the
and destroy.
briefings.
Just the entire little mission was just
Oh,
like
the
go
stages.
here.
Yeah, yeah.
Like not all of them. There were like a good variety of them. Some of them were like you go through this labyrinth and you fight a mech at the end, but some of them were just like go here and destroy 10 anti-aircraft guns, and then you do that, and if you're good or if your kit is good, you might be able to finish that in like 2 minutes. And like
Yeah,
that's just kind
I
of like the
remember
variety.
specifically Armored Core to Another Age. If I remember correctly, it had like 200 missions. And yeah, some of them were longer, but out of those missions, some of them were just bite-sized, like go here to defeat a thing, and it only took like 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's how those games are, and of course, like factors into it because like like you'll get new parts for like S ranking missions, so like doing them like you're incentivized to do them fast because a lot of
Mhm.
like the rankings are factor in time completion, so you'll want to be efficient like getting through them too. On top of that, yeah, man, I can't wait. But yes, all right. So I don't know. Like maybe I will look at Lost Epic when it goes on sale. How often does it go on sale? Do you know?
It's on sale right now. That's why I got it. It was like $10. I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot.
You're a
What's
liar.
the do?
I'm on its Steam page. It's not on sale. You just probably got it like after the Steam sale.
I bought it on PS5 actually,
Oh, okay. Never mind.
but
So,
maybe you could get it on the Switch. Maybe you could buy it on the Switch too. Or
I
maybe
mean,
you're not the Switch guy.
there's no crossplay. I can't play with you.
Oh, rip.
Yeah. I mean, there's not like a big game. I doubt it has crossplay. All right, so that's the Detention and Lost Epic. Well, what are you looking forward to? Are you gonna play, like are you actually looking forward to like a new game, or are you gonna stick with like
I'm
just
gonna
old
play
games for
old
now?
games. So after I'm done with this, I am gonna play a game. Was it? I am gonna ask my friend to translate this visual novel while he's playing it because he forced me to play Detention, so I'm gonna force him to play like a 20-hour visual novel instead, doing translation while watching him play.
Is this like you guys like challenge each other? It's like, oh yeah, you made me play this, I'm gonna make you play this. Is this like an ongoing thing?
Yeah, basically. But yeah, I'm gonna make him play a visual novel called Dokoku Soshite, which is translate as crying, and that's basically the translation for it.
Never heard of
Um,
it.
okay, it's a Data East visual novel. Have you
Okay,
ever heard
well,
Data
yeah,
East?
yes, yeah.
Yes, I think this is
Godspeed
one
then.
of the few visual novels they ever made, and it is for it's for Sega Saturn, and then there is also a Vita port. The Vita
Oh,
port has more content, while the Saturn version is the original. Basically, it's like Saw. I think Saw is like the best way to describe this game. It's like
okay.
basically what happens. The main character gets on the bus with his classmates, and it crashes, and he wakes up in an abandoned mansion, and all his friends are missing. He's trying to find his friends, and depending on how you solve the puzzles, what is it? You could save your friends, and there's like multiple solutions, and depending on what solution you use to solve the puzzle, is like how the routes split in this game.
Okay,
Right?
that's interesting. Yeah.
And yeah, apparently there's some kind of serial murder killing people, and you're trying to save your friends in this abandoned woods, and that's kind of like the game. And we're like, yeah, we like horror, so we're gonna play this game to see where it goes.
I'm also considering picking up a visual novel as well. I'm still thinking of like I'm gonna get the what do they call it, the shell, Shiravune's release of Kara no Shoujo. I'm still thinking about maybe getting that.
Hmm. Maybe I should
People
check
seem
that
Chow,
out.
are you going to play any new game this year other than the official re-release of in English of White Album? Are you,
Uh,
are you going to
I'll
play that, or are you
really
just going to buy it and support it?
I'll buy and support it, but I'll try to play it and beat it because I know the first one just like whatever. It kind of that's like my experience of it. Okay, okay, maybe I'll play it just to hear Aya Hirano talking to me. Maybe because she does voice the main character in this game.
Well, have you tried out the Grand Blue versus Rising
No,
beta?
I didn't get to the beta.
No, it's open beta right now. Like it's available to
Mm,
everyone. There was an early access period. They gave codes out, and then starting last night, since it's recording, they opened it up to everyone. Like, but it's still only through certain time slots.
I better not play the beta because that'll like, kind of confuse you how the final product turns out because a lot of the times when you play the beta, it's like they use a different system. Like I would be like lingering nonstop after the beta. It'll be like me playing Street Fighter V when it first came out. How Karen is like 10 times more broken than the final release, and then I'm just dreading over it. Like how dare they fucking nerf her, even though she's already broken. But the beta version's even more broken.
Yeah,
Right?
I'm thinking maybe I'll wait till the final release too, because like it's I feel like at this point a lot of people are like kind of not satisfied with how the beta's been going.
I
Yeah,
was going
like
to
I know
ask you,
like people are
Josh,
upset.
because
Oh, sorry.
I saw Josh sharing some people's impressions of it's Grand Blue versus Rising. Is that it? It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's like an expansion, added roster, new characters,
It's
and
like
like
it's basically a sequel. Like it's not like a DLC thing. It's actually like a full follow up, I believe,
gotcha.
to the base game.
But I've just seen
Uh,
as someone who's not in the fighting game sphere and not in the Grand Blue sphere, the impressions that you've shared, like in our Discord, seem kind of lukewarm. Like this doesn't feel that great. And I just wanted, if you had gone hands on, I was going to ask you what
I
your
yeah,
opinion
I was
was.
I don't know yet. I don't know if I'm gonna do it or not
Right.
because like I'm doing other stuff this weekend. I'm just like, I maybe should
hard
just
to
wait till the
like.
full release.
It's very hard to convince me to play it at this point because it's like, wow, Street Fighter Six exists. Yeah.
That's the thing, right? Like if I think about playing, I'm like I'd rather play Street Fighter instead if I'm gonna play a fighting game right now because I like the prospect when I think about why like playing Street Fighter 6, I want to like I genuinely like get excited to play it again, you know. And with Grand Blue, it's like sure I hear the netcode's way better, obviously, but like there's a lot of like systems to like or changes to its like fighting system that like kind of waters it down from like what was there before. It's like it's
Like
not
I
it
think
doesn't
they
feel great.
nailed the game in the very first version of it, and it just keeps getting worse over time because they just make the characters more nerf, more unfun, and then it just keeps piling up every single patch. So that eventually your character feels gimped just for balance sakes. and I don't really like that approach to the game. It's kind of like Diablo 4 season, like the new season that came out, where they just nerf everything that's
so
fun.
bad. I hate. Oh my god, season 1's so bad.
And then you're like, oh, this is just for balancing, and now you waste more of our time and just. It's just,
it's so funny. It's so funny that like every single fucking Diablo 4 player or anyone who's like making content for Diablo 4, like they're all just watching ExileCon going on this weekend, which is like the convention in New Zealand for the Path of Exile, and everything they've been showing about like Path of Exile 2 has been like really good. And it's like fuck, man. At least these, at least like these developers get it. But yeah.
The one thing I saw about Path of Exile 2, first of all, I thought that this was already the plan, but I guess they recently like reestablished that this was the plan. Is that like Path of Exile 2 will coexist alongside Path of Exile 1 because they realize, they have lots of people who have developed communities and,
No, I think the original plan was literally it would be like a big update to Path of Exile 1.
That was the original plan.
Would be Path of Exile 2. So it would have been like all Path of Exile 1 games would become 2.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that was the original plan.
So this having them coexist is new as of this month.
Yes,
which I think is really like that's really. I think a few games have done similar things. Like, I guess Overwatch is gonna do that. I don't know. Overwatch is in a strange place because they keep changing the plan on what Overwatch 2 is gonna be. But in general, I think that's really neat that they kind of recognize that they don't want to take Path of Exile 1 from people who have grown to love it, and if they have the resources to support both games, put more power to them. As someone who doesn't play either game, I saw that.
They're actually being very smart about it. So, like, aside from being two separate products, like microtransactions are shared between both games. So, any cosmetics that you got, the stash tabs that you got, they're going to be shared across both games. So,
wow, that's a good system.
That's really cool. The way that they're structuring like ongoing support for both games is really smart. Like, say they start up a new update for Path of Exile 2, like the new content update. Like that'll run its course for like several weeks. Then after like say that lasts for 6 weeks, then like say like three weeks after that initial period, or sorry, it's like 7 or 8 weeks after like that update comes out, then they'll do like a new league for like Path of Exile 1. So they're gonna like flip flop between releases in terms of like their updates, where it's gonna be like a substantial content update for like 2, then following that after like a certain amount of time, it's gonna be back to 1. So you can continue playing the content update for 2, or if you want to play more Path of Exile 1, you can go back there, but they won't like overlap it into each other and have you feel like overwhelmed that like you might be falling behind on one if you're not doing the other at the same time. So that's the kind of their current plans, or their thinking of like how they're gonna do like a staggered approach to both games when supporting both games in their content updates. The Path of Exile 2, like one of the when they're showing off a demo for it, one of the big things. It sounds weird to say there's like a new big thing, but like they're having a dodge roll in it, which is like there's no cooldown on the dodge roll. You can use the dodge roll freely, like to cancel out your skills. It's like projectile and melee involved, but you can still get hit out of it. Like if you get hit something by that, like it's not those properties. One of the really, really crazy things they're doing with Path of Exile 2 is that your character has like, let's say like you're a wizard class or like a sorcerer class, and you have like an ice build and a fire build. You can actually toggle between those once you use a weapon skill from those things. So instead of building up one skill tree, you're actually building up 2 skill trees per character depending on the build that you want them to go. So it's like almost like a dual spec on the fly during combat. So like you can have like a damage build and like a melee or a magic find build, on the same character, and like and you access them through weapon skills. And that's just like and the cooldown is basically you taking out the other weapon for it.
Oh, cool. That's the first time I've heard that.
Yeah, so they have a lot of really interesting ideas and their approach to it, and and the Path of Exile community and like the way those games are, it's very complex, and very like if you're into action RPGs, this kind of like almost the holy grail for you. Like like tweaking numbers, tweaking stats, and like exploring build variety and so forth. So like I'm not a big Path of Exile player. Like I'm not one at all.
I
I have
played it during launch. I backed the Kickstarter. I think they did a
Oh,
Kickstarter,
okay,
and I
wow.
backed that, and I played it for a little bit. I'm like, yeah, this is cool, but it's very early access at that point. So I'm
Yeah,
like,
so
and
it's
then I
obviously
just
a
kind of
different
forgot
beast.
about the game, but everyone keeps speaking highly of it every time
Yeah,
it came
like
out.
I have friends who like have played it for a decade, like straight up, literally a decade. You know, very loyal players, and their understanding is very they're very hardcore players in it. So like a lot of like what I know about it is through them. Um, but I'm really interested, like I feel like at this point, for I can't my brain can't wrap itself around like Path of Exile 1. But I think with Path of Exile 2, I'll try to make like a real effort to like try and understand and get into Path of Exile 2, because it's basically a whole new game. Everyone's kind of starting out like from the ground up, and yeah, it's what I've been seeing and everything they've been showing about Path of Exile 2. It's like, fuck, man, this looks so much better than what Diablo 4 is going for it. Like, dear God.
I feel kind of silly, but I did not realize. I'm googling it now that Path of Exile was crowdfunded. Like, oh, I
Yeah,
guess it was.
You would never imagine.
yeah, they've come a really long way. So it's cool. I think I'll be attending PAX West next in early September, and I think they'll be showing off Path of Exile 2 there. So I might be able to get hands on with it. Soon enough, and really interested to see how that goes. The demo, the build that they have at ExileCon right now, they're bringing to PAX West, and that build looks fucking hard. Like people, like experienced players, like actually just like regularly die there, and they even told like people who like attend that con who are like already loyal Path of Exile hardcore players. They're like, yeah, just don't be surprised if like you just like get blown up like after seeing like the first enemies that you see. It's like a totally new, different game. The way you play it is different. Like, just don't be surprised that, like, hey, I just even having all this knowledge, like, with my like beneath my belt, you know, I might just die still.
Have you ever been? Have you been to PAX Fest before? Just curious.
No, I've never been there, so
Yeah,
I'm excited.
I was last there in like 2016, which part of my brain was like just a few years ago. Like, oh wait, that's like 7 years ago. One not this year, but maybe next year I'll head back there.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
yeah,
excited for that, and yeah, I'm
I'm
glad.
pretty excited.
Even though none of us here can speak directly to Path of Exile, um, as like a consistent player, I did want to just bring it up that I saw a couple of those headlines. People seem really excited about the work that they're doing over there.
Yeah, they've been killing it. That it's really crazy to see how far the Path of Exile developers have come, and like really like that game. The first Path of Exile has always gotten consistent support, like through thick and thin, and like that just um really changed up the game. Like I was watching ExileCon with like my friends yesterday, and like the new like league update for Path of Exile 1 coming, like has like a new like mode, or it's like the league mechanic like turns out like almost like an auto chess game, you know. And like one of the past leagues like Sanctum, a lot of them really got into it because of, like, it added like a roguelike mode to it that was like very rewarding in the way that like you experimented with build variety through it. And like it did so well that they're adding that um mechanic into the core game now as a permanent thing, but it's more expanded, more expanded upon, and they're a lot of them are very happy about that, and the way that they're not only just like implementing it into the core game, but like all the ways they're expanding it and tweaking it like in smart ways. It's just like it's very much like a developer that like understands their community, and they know how to um build their game. And
Mhm.
XLCon has been like a lot of fun to watch too, because I've been watching like the developer panels with them, and like they have like panels of like just like the animators are like, yeah, this is like they have like a new mocap way that they're building out animations of Path of Exile 2, and then speaking about them. And then like one of like some of the longtime animators of Path of Exile 1, it's like, yeah, man, all the work I fucking did for Path of Exile 1, like it looks so bad to me compared to like what I've been doing for Path of Exile 2. Like they're just showing off like characters and moves and their animations, and they all look like really crunchy and satisfying, and I'm getting really giddy about the work that they've been building for years. It's like that's so fucking awesome. It looks so cool.
One thing that I do think that I haven't been watching ExileCon, but the way you've described it is that when developers have like this opportunity to show people who are loyal followers of their product, and they're not afraid to have it be a little bit raw in terms of like showing unfinished work. This is a bit strange, but I was actually watching and I'm just using this tangent to kind of just illustrate the point. I was watching of all things, the Sims 4 like developer like stream, and they were showing some new update to the Sims 4 where they were like adding horses to the game, and they were showing like all the model and animation work that they were doing with people like getting on the horses and like all the fans being like, hell yeah, horses or whatever. And just like there's something that's so like different about like a developer knowing what their audience wants, being able to show it, even if it's like a work in progress, even if it's like doesn't have quite the same sheen to it that it would in like a formal like press conference or Nintendo Direct, but knowing that they have like built up the goodwill with their audience because they've been, consumer focused in terms of knowing who they're trying to like, what they're developing the game for, and like why they put all the time and effort into it, and knowing, yeah, that's the whole reason we're deciding to support Path of Exile 1 in addition to Path of Exile 2 is because we know that this is what our fans want. And it's just there's just something refreshing about that to know that people are tuning into this and being just really excited about all the work that's going on in a venue that's kind of very explicitly made for them. So I just think that that's just neat in concept.
Yeah, that's also been like my favorite like sorts of events that like when you're kind of like holding a public event, it's like actually getting like the people who are working like boots on the ground, and actually showing off like things that like are in their fields. Like we're talking about like animation people talking about like the animation work that they did, or like the people in the writing process talking about the story that they wrote. Like I know there was a panel for like the FF14 Fan Fest that like talk about like that specialize in endwalkers and like and getting to like having a whole panel just about the narrative of endwalkers, and establishing what they want to do with that story, their thoughts, their philosophy behind it, and kind of establishing that trust with their fan base. That like one that they experienced that and like read and like have a good understanding of like what they experienced through it. Like that's really cool. Like getting to see like beyond what you just played, like getting to like know like the human story behind it, creating that sort of the process behind it. It's always been like one of the best things about like the video game industry, in my opinion. Just like the kind of the human story behind how these things come together has always been really, really compelling.
So we kind of tangented over into a Path of Exile Con out of Chow's discussion with both Detention and Lost Epic, but now I think we basically covered pretty much everything that everyone's been playing over the last couple of weeks. I didn't really have a section because I spent the week wrapping up like Tears of the Kingdom and Dragon Quest Treasures, both of which are games that I've already had a chance to talk about previously. But we'll go into August. Obviously, we'll spend a good chunk of time next week, presumably, talking about Baldur's Gate 3. That reminds me, I should ping in our Discord and see if we have anyone else on staff who's typically not on the podcast, if they're interested in trying that game and talking about it on the podcast. So I'll make a note to myself to ask for that, just to see if anyone else wants to jump on and discuss that game next week. And with that, we'll go into kind of the news front here. The news front is going to be a little bit quieter. And like I kind of stated earlier, a lot of this is kind of embargoes that have lifted over the last few days, and some previews and some reviews. So at the very least, I figured I can at least kind of give each of these articles a shout out, even if we don't have the firsthand experience to go into each of these in depth. First of all, the ones that we've kind of already talked about, Josh did put up a written review for Arcadian Atlas, which is the indie tactical RPG that we opened up this podcast with. Josh, you did also write up a review on Remnant 2, which you and James kind of discussed at length last week. Here's just an opportunity here if you want to have like 60 seconds about your written thoughts, or if they just kind of mirror the things that you talked about last week with James.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything new to say about Remnant 2. It's an awesome game. It's been really fun to like follow the community for that game, because there's still secrets in that game that the community has been working towards. Like they finally found like one of like the most secret archetypes or classes in that game. like James was talking about, like a red door in the labyrinth level in that game that like no one knew how the fuck to open it, and the community finally found it. And it's pretty interesting because that was like like the way to find that that out, like that new archetype out. Like the developers intentionally made it obtuse in a way that like they were anticipating the community to data mine the game to find out how you unlocked it, and that's like kind of the intended method to find out how to unlock this is through data mining the game as a community together. I'm like, wow, that's really fucking crazy. That you would plan that out actually. So that's been a lot of fun. I want to see like what skills that new archetype has that they uncovered. I need to go ask my friends who are much more hardcore, how that's shaping up. So that's ongoing. The community continues to like discover new things about that game, even with players putting hundreds and hundreds of hours into it already. It's like, okay, what else does the game have? It's like that's such a cool thing about the games as a community together to like in that phase, like in any game, where before like guides of like knowing everything about the game is already has like that discovery phase. Like that game is built around that, like of the community having this discovery phase together. It is always exciting.
A bit of a tangent that's related to that. I was mentioning all the games, or not all, some of the games that I still have installed on my Steam account. And one of those games is Elden Ring because of the announced expansion, whose expansion I'm blanking on right at the moment. They've given it nothing more than a title, but Legend of the Erd Tree, something like that. But
Shadow of the Erd Tree or something.
Shadow of the Erd Tree, that's it. But when I had the opportunity, graciously to play that game pre-release, I reviewed it, and at the time, of course, there was no wiki, no Fextra Life, for all the work that they do tons of great, encyclopedic work over there. But there was something about like not having any sort of community, anything when playing through that game, of everything just being complete discovery, where it almost feels kind of sad in a way, where if I were to like replay Elden Ring, I only ever got the basic ending. I didn't get any of the secret endings where it's like, oh, I can just kind of look this up now, and it's all like encyclopedically documented about exactly what all the quests are, what all the triggers are. So there's something about the way you've described this kind of communal discovery of this archetype in Remnant 2, like before it's all documented, playing a game before it's all like distilled down on the internet and like into these like wiki pages and guides that kind of you can't recreate once it's there, unless you have like the willpower just to determine not to look at them, sort of thing.
Yeah,
which might be a little bit easier in a single player game like Elden Ring versus a multiplayer game like Remnant. But yeah, that's what it made you think of when you were the way you're describing that recent finding.
Yeah, it's always hard because like it's getting harder to find that sort of experience these days, because like as soon as day one, like when a game hits, like a lot of people have already played it before release, and because of like how the internet is structured now, and how people are always what traffics well on the internet will be like those guides to finding the secrets and knowing everything day one, and like you do lose a lot of like that the mystic aspect of games of like discovering it on your own. You can do it yourself and like intentionally not seek those out for sure, but like it felt more magical when like no one had that capability, or like had very limited capability to do that.
Gonna sound very like millennial of me, but like going to like the lunch counter with your friends in middle school or high school and discussing these things. Like, yeah, of course you did have like GameFAQs existed back then, but it wasn't as ubiquitous as it is now.
Pikachu would surf,
yeah.
If you look under the truck and you'll find unknown.
The rumor when I was in like 5th or 6th grade was, if you put a level 99 Pikachu in the daycare and waited until it got to level 100, it would turn into Pikablue. Pikablue, of course, just being like some magazine scan of Meryl from the like 2nd gen of Pokemon, who is not Pikablue, but a different Pokemon entirely. Anyways, if you're younger than 30, this is what you got to avoid by being born after us.
Man, I've been trolled online trying to do the Mew trick.
Oh, dude, it's so good. Yeah, like those were my favorite eras of the internet. It's like just didn't fucking know, right? It's like it sounded so absurd, and it's like, but you can't completely dismiss it because it sounds so cool.
Another one I remember, was Did you know Mecha Frieza comes back in Dragon Ball, and it's just
What?
Frieza with like a robot face, like with in the Android song, like, holy shit, Mecha Frieza or whatever. Like, oh, it's whatever.
Sorry, Dragon Ball spoiler didn't work for me because I came from China and we already had all the Dragon Ball by the time I came here. But they're fucking still airing. So people just come to my house.
So
for
you're the one misleading people about Mecha Frieza instead of just being like, yeah, there you go. All right, more features up on RPGsite.net. Here's another one from Josh. You spoke last week at length about one of the story arcs in Fate Grand O, the Avalon Lefay chapter, and you basically took what you said you were going to do last week episode on the podcast and wrote up your thoughts on it and pushed it out as a formal kind of like opinion piece up on RPGsite.net. And based on at least the social kind of engagement that the tweet got, it seems like a lot of people have resonated with basically what your opinion on this chapter of Fate Grand Order.
Yeah, I wasn't really expecting like a big response to it. Like I was very surprised that a lot of people, like we got a lot of positive reception and feedback from it, and I was like very happy that a lot of people shared that same sentiment. But I just didn't expect such a big response out of it. I thought I was right like for myself, and like it was like people might like it, might not, but like I just wasn't expecting like that sort of like response to it. So I'm really glad that that piece seems to have done well and reached a lot of people and on that end. But yeah, it's just basically.
Did you know it also made a pretty sizable post on our games?
Really?
You know that? Yeah,
I did not know that. That's crazy.
There you go. It's making the rounds.
Yeah. But it's I poorly put it into words last week in the podcast. So I was like, I can do a better job with the text this time around because writing about it is actually pretty difficult because you have to try to like I had to write it in a way that like made sense to normal people, and that's tough with the terminology in this game and like the way that you have to kind of explain stuff and the setup and everything and whatnot. So it was a pretty challenging piece to write up, but I'm glad it got through to a lot of people, and a lot of people really agreed with it. So that's really cool to see. I'm just really happy that with the response to it. I'm glad that I'm still kind of like shocked and like wow, that kind of really blew up.
My favorite one is still the Twitter post. It's like you could have just played the English patch 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's always the fan translation people. It's like, come on, man.
It's like no.
My favorite response was like, "Who the fuck is Josh?" Those are my favorite responses. Like, yeah, you're right. It's like you can just like click the link and you can see who wrote it. Like, no, we're like you'd rather just type out who the fuck is Josh. That's my favorite.
Another feature that went up last week that also kind of got a pretty large kind of like reception, even though I think some of it was a little bit like negative, not in a bad way, is Paul Skrelly, who has kind of been he was brought onto RPG Site as a contributor like 3 or 4 months back, and who's been writing like opinion features every other week or so. Wrote up a feature after playing Final Fantasy XVI, specifically about the combat of Final Fantasy XIII, and about how Final Fantasy XIII's design of its combat system has kind of led the charge or kind of informed most of the Final Fantasy games that have come since Final Fantasy VII Remake, Final Fantasy XV, and Final Fantasy XVI. Called Final Fantasy XIII's combat continues to influence the series. Final Fantasy XIII, of course, more bespokely specific to that game, had the paradigm system, which is only found in that series, and so on. But talked a little bit more about the stagger gauge and how that's kind of shown up in different formats in the series ever since. And this has gotten also a bit of a kind of feedback on socials as well about no, it's not really the same, or yes, but, and I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting opinion about how Final Fantasy XIII, a game that's wasn't well regarded at the time, but seems to have been kind of softened on in the years since its release, like 13 years ago or whenever that was. So I at least wanted to give Paul's feature kind of a shout out here, even though I know he hasn't made a presence on the podcast quite yet. So that was also one of the opinion features that went up last week that seems has made a few a few impressions across.
It is pretty interesting
Twitter.
that like a lot of game design has like really been thinking about how to like make these the concept of a stagger, like visualizing a stagger meter or bar or gauge like intrinsic to like the combat system of a game, like that's been getting more and more prevalent, not just in Final Fantasy alone, but you think of things like Sekiro, for example, where stagger was a big part of it. You have Armored Core now, having some sort of stagger mechanic be a part of it.
Or just in general, the idea of having kind of like, depending on the game or where what you grew up with, like having played some MMOs in the time, I kind of refer to them as burn phases. Basically, a phase where the defenses are down, where you want to deal as much damage as possible, but you're dealing damage to like a different meter versus the other meters. But of course, the specifics depend on the game you're playing, whether it's like a stagger meter or it might be like an armor that you deplete that might regenerate. But the fact that stagger is kind of what they've gone with the Final Fantasy series is what Paul is going with here.
Yeah, like you also had like more like outliers, like side games, for example, like Dragalia Lost sort of almost had like a stagger mechanic when that game was still in service. Grand Blue sort of has a stagger mechanic too, but like I forgot how it works, Chow. And Grand Blue, like you fill up when you're going up against a boss, you have a bar that fills up.
Okay, so basically they have a charge diamond. So there's like a diamond in there. It's like, okay, they're going to use their ultimate attack in, I don't know, it could be 2 diamonds, it could be 1 diamond, or even 4, right? And then there's also another gauge. If you're able to break the gauge, that diamond resets and they're in their break state. But usually the game likes to cheat because it'll be like, oh yeah, you damaged past its 50% HP threshold. It just goes back to normal. The break gauge is kind of like a lie. You can't really use it to cheat for your most.
At a point in Grand Blue, they used to take their stagger mechanic more seriously, but it feels like because of years of power creep.
They added like some failsafe mechanics so that you can't cheese through certain bosses. Even though characters in Grand Blue are now ridiculously strong, you could do like billions of damage in like a couple turns versus
it just looks like this Gaia numbers now. Whenever I see like footage of that game, it's like, yeah, this just looks like this Gaia numbers.
It's like, yeah, look, boss that you thought that were impossible can now be solo with the full auto bundle now. Stuff like that happens in the game.
And one of the comparisons that Paul brings up in his article is how in Final Fantasy XVI there are certain icon abilities that are more adept at building up the stagger gauge. Like the ones that I used were like Shiva's Diamond Dust and Garuda's Gouge abilities are really good at building up the stagger. And then once you get that through, you switch to a different icon like Bahamut or whatever to actually deal the straight damage. Even because we haven't had a chance to talk about this, I just want to at least ping. I don't know, Chow, have you played Final Fantasy 16 or not? I forget.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, Chow and Josh. I know Adam, you don't count for this conversation. Between these 3 icon fights, who did you like? Which fight did you like the most between Titan, Odin, or any of the other fights? I guess.
I like Titan the most.
I like the first Titan fight. I don't really like the Lost Titan fight, but I like the first Titan fight. That was probably
Lost Titan's probably the most boring part of the fight in my opinion because
what about the Bahamut fight?
Bahamut fight, it's just like a spectacle. I don't find the fight really engaging, but it's like you're just watching it for the fireworks.
It's like when you get to like the final part of it, it's like wow, this like the scale of like where this game went is insane. But it's like once again, it's like a one-time spectacle like thing. But in terms of like build up and like what you're actually doing in the fight itself, like mechanics wise, like I just wish I wish more of that game was like the first Titan fight when it came to like its showdowns.
Yeah, I like the more like was it man versus man combat, right?
Yeah.
I feel like the game is also like not designed for certain mechanics. Like, was it like for example, have you ever fought the Hunt Quest, the Marliff brothers? Right, there's 3 elite mobs, and I feel like the game just does not do a good job on fighting multiple elites. It's like the game was never designed that way.
There's like going back to Paul's piece, like the FF13 stagger. Like I feel like FF13 dealt with the stagger mechanic like a bit better than how FF16 does it, because like the stagger mechanic in FF16 is so boring because you can't really do anything with the enemy in their staggered. You're just like firmly planted on the ground. You can't combo them. You can't put them in the air.
Yeah,
you're just like lying there, and you're just like putting you're just kind of making the most of them just lying there. It's like, all right.
Yeah, or maybe you save all your abilities, just throw them all at once when they're staggered. It's like
And that,
very
that,
engaging.
that when I finished the Final Fantasy mode playthrough, that's basically what it ended up being, because it just was, all right, they're staggered. I have 10 seconds just to throw out all my strongest abilities in whatever order. The order doesn't really matter. It matters a little bit, but also just a pure numbers thing. If I remember right, in Final Fantasy 13, like you can build stagger percentages up to like 300, 400%. And it's not just the fact that it's higher, but it feels more rewarding. Where in Final Fantasy 16, it goes up to 150%. So like, oh, I guess I'm getting a little bit of extra, utility, waiting until the stagger to use my Mega Flare or Giga Flare or whatever, versus Final Fantasy 13, where you really benefit your damage output during the stagger. In Final Fantasy 16, it doesn't feel as impactful. But anyways, I just brought up the question because I saw some people stating, I believe it was like a Reddit forum, that they really didn't like the Odin fight because it's mostly Clive versus the Odin's dominant. And I actually kind of liked it. The fact like Titan Lost was too much spectacle for me, too much like cutscene interactive, like cutscene stuff that I kind of just wish was over a bit quicker. But the Odin fight, I actually thought like, hey, this actually engages like the combat system of the game. Maybe a little bit less spectacle, but I was okay with that, with the trade-off of actually having a boss fight. So I was just thinking of that when you were talking about the combat systems of these two games.
Mm-hmm.
But we have
I'm not sure about you guys, but I don't know how you did a whole new Game Plus playthrough. I feel like I'm bored of the battle system by like near the Odin part by then.
As shallow and stupid as it is, I got through the Final Fantasy mode purely by knowing, hey, as soon as I reach the credits, I get the platinum trophy and I can turn this game off. Like halfway through, I was like, all right, I've gotten my fill. I will say, yeah, because I got the platinum trophy, so now I am now obligated, or not obligated, to play the game anymore. I did like the Titan Lost fight the first time I played it, just in terms of pure spectacle, but it's a bit of a chore to go through again. Just like, oh, I've seen all this.
I think it's interesting. Like, it's been barely like a month since that game has come out, like a little over a month. But I feel like I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like the general sentiment and public opinion on it has kind of half been dying down, half been kind of like, it's been whatever,
I think it's a alright game. It's just not perfect like everyone likes to hype it up to be.
Well, it's the same sort of thing. Like, one thing that we always talk about here, kind of on the back end of things, is when we're reviewing something, we are of course obligated to score it, even if we want, whether or not we want to. Going with kind of the lower score in your mind, just because usually once that honeymoon period is over, you kind of see the game, whether it's a good game, great game, average game, mediocre game. You see it a little bit more clearly once you have a little bit of distance, once you haven't booted it up in a week or so. And with Final Fantasy 16, it's kind of like, I like Cullen, of course, scored it an 8 for the site. So that kind of serves as the site's kind of representative. Of course, we all might individually think differently, some higher, some lower. But it's one of those games where once you have some distance from it, you kind of get away from all the marketing hype. The fact that game was on our like most anticipated list 3 years in a row. So that kind of colors your initial honeymoon impression or whatever. And once that's no longer matters and no longer registers, you're like, okay, how did I actually feel about this game? You can say it with a little bit more assurance that you're going to hold to an opinion that actually sticks. And once you're away from the game for a month, 2 months, a year, like, yeah, that's how I ended up feeling about that one.
Yeah.
And I do kind of agree that it seems like its general consensus has softened a bit, but I guess the true kind of stakes of that will arise in about 4 to 5 months when we have to talk about the game and where it ranks or places amongst all the other games that released this year in the November, early December timeframe. So it'll be interesting to see where that all shakes out in a few months. A couple other features that are up on the site. Here's one that was a little bit based on the fact that within the last couple of days, we celebrated the 4th anniversary of Fire Emblem Three Houses, which of course was kind of, as far as if I'm remembering correctly, the best-selling game of that series, a game that was like kind of broke the mold for several other Fire Emblem kind of archetypes, reached a bar that Fire Emblem Engage didn't quite reach. so we got a opinion feature for Fire Emblem Three Houses put up on the site within the last couple of days from Nathan Lee, specifically around the character of Edelgard as a antagonist that basically broke the mold and served as one of the like landmark hallmark antagonists for the series, celebrating the 4th anniversary of Three Houses. So that's up on the site as well. I will say,
it's funny thinking about a character like Edelgard. Not to, hopefully we don't get too deep into it here, but like thinking about a character like Edelgard after coming off of Engage, like where the Engage antagonist has like nothing to them. Like
yeah,
oh.
It is one of those things where that's another game, and Fire Emblem Engage with the few months of hindsight. It's like, I think even at the time, people kind of knew that it felt like it didn't quite reach that same bar. At least in some ways, you could argue, well, specifically the map design of Engage was better than Three Houses. Like, yeah, like, I can see that, but as a whole package, I don't think it just reached that same level. You could argue a lot of reasons here, and I don't want to get on too much of a tangent. At the time, if you had asked me this question maybe like a year or 2 years ago, like what I thought of Edelgard, I do think at least 2 years ago me would have thought that she was a bit overrated. The one thing that I always thought that Edelgard did that I thought was a little bit undercooked was the fact that she kind of threw in her lot with that cult, the people who slither in the dark, without really a contingency in mind. She was just like, oh, they have the power I need. I will ally myself with them, hell or high water, no matter what. And I always thought that that was a little bit shallow. But then after playing Fire Emblem Engage, I'm like, you know what? Edelgard's a great character.
Yeah,
like, you know, she's excellent. Like compared to like all the other antagonists of Engage, Edelgard did stand out. Of Three Houses, she did stand out, but compared to like her contemporaries in more recent games, she stands out even more. But if you haven't played Three Houses, or you have played but haven't read about the game in a while, Nathan did put up a nice feature specifically looking at a character dive of Edelgard up on the site. The title of the article is Three Houses Edelgard is the antagonist that defined a new generation of Fire Emblem.
And then we also know what that writing team is up to when we get to the news in a bit as well.
Mm-hmm. A few other features that are up on the site. A lot of these were previews that we had the opportunity, specifically James had the opportunity to look at a few months ago around the time of Anime Expo, but their embargoes were just kind of long-winded and didn't lift until the last couple days.
This was Summer Games Fest. Anime Expo was earlier this month.
Well, I still think of it as a while ago, but yeah, some of these were things I know that James had been sitting on for a while, but wasn't able to talk about until just a few weeks ago, or even within this last week. One of which is he had the chance to look at the upcoming Amazon games published, at least in the West, MMO Blue Protocol. This is the Bandai Namco MMORPG that was announced in around 2019, went dark for a while, reappeared at the Game Awards. Was it last year or the year before? Last year. Yeah, it reemerged a few years after it had gone dark. It released in Japan kind of back in June. So if you dig around, like Blue Protocol, I haven't done this digging myself, but I have to imagine that it's kind of a known quantity at this point, at least as of its release date. Of course, online games, MMOs specifically, are kind of living things. They kind of change their reputation throughout years, in some cases even decades at a time. But James was able to go hands-on with Blue Protocol. It is slated for release in the West next year. And we did get both James having the opportunity to publish his impressions on Blue Protocol during his time with it, as well as Bandai Namco and Amazon Games released in the last week a new trailer for the game, at least for its Western release next year. The trailer is a lot of it's story focused, but does have a lot of like combat cinematics. It does the sort of thing where it hides all the UI, it hides all of the like actual meat and potatoes of how the game actually looks and plays. But that seems kind of beside the point because the game's out in Japan, and if you want to figure out how it plays, you can kind of easily do that. But just kind of reminding people that I don't know if this is going to be the game that ends up being Amazon's hit. It seems like I don't know if this is actually the case, but it seems like they're kind of desperate between this and Lost Ark and the Lord of the Rings to the Amazon and New World. they're hoping that one of these can end up occupying the sort of space that like WoW or Final Fantasy XIV does. Will Blue Protocol be that game? I don't know. I guess I would say I doubt it, but I don't know if I have any authority to say that with any like sort of substantiation. So we got a new trailer for Blue Protocol. James was able to put up his impressions with the game up on the site, with the usual caveat that it is very hard, very, very hard to get a preview impression for an MMO, just due to the time periods involved. But that is up on the site for those that are eager to dive into this game next year. James also did, we'll kind of give this one as a glancing pass, have a impression piece up on the site about Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon, which we've talked about in a few different contexts on this podcast. Obviously not a game that I don't believe we intend to cover specifically for RPG Sites Purview, but a game that clearly a lot of people both on the site, on the staff side, as well as on like the community side, like if you go into our Discord, a lot of talk about Armored Core 6 in that place as well, as a upcoming release within the next month that a lot of people are excited for. So James did put up kind of a, hey, this isn't an RPG, but it's a game that's really shaping up to be something special over on the features of our site underneath the Branching Path moniker.
It has stats.
So it does have stats.
Yeah. Armored Core does have stats. That's true.
It's an RPG.
There are like, I'm not gonna say it's an RPG, but there are certain like new systems in it that, like, it does share RPG elements.
RPG adjacent.
Yeah, RPG adjacent, but I wouldn't call it RPG stuff. But it's always fun to talk about, especially it's kind of for me, like specifically, it's kind of like more of like a guiding role of like a lot of people. Armored Core's always been a niche series, and finally kind of getting its breakout hit moment and seeing how that goes. Like for me, what's really valuable is like hearing and seeing and talking with people who are like, this will be their first Armored Core. They come from like a Souls background probably, and seeing like, what did they think of it? And I spoke with Jay-Z before he published his piece, several days before it went up. Like, just talking with him about like his time at the event, what he saw, what are things that may be interesting, like to veterans that like they would like to know for that piece, and also just general like what did he think? And it's been generally positive. Like he really liked what he saw. He saw that a lot of people had a lot of fun with it, and there's just a crazy amount of potential with this upcoming release for this game. So I'm really, really excited to see how everyone feels when they get into it, and they get hands on with the full game, and just seeing what crazy things people will come up with.
James did also put up a couple other features on the site. One of the more kind of understated ones here is for an upcoming September release. This is Infinity Strash Dragon Quest: The Adventures of Dai. This is, of course, the action RPG that was announced also a while back. I'm looking at it looks like it was announced in mid-2020, so about 3 years ago. James did get a, let me double check here. I want to make sure that he got sometimes you only get a hands-off preview for these events. He says he got an early look during Anime Expo, so I don't know if this was hands-on or hands-off, but he was able to get an extended preview of the game in either case with Dragon Quest Infinity Strash Adventures of Dai back during Anime Expo. And then Square Enix did also recently release a bunch of screenshots for this game. This is slated to come out near the end of September. One thing, I haven't been following this game as closely as I would like. One thing, until I started catching up with James's preview here up on the site, as well as the little bit of news that Square Enix directly provided over the last week, is that I didn't realize that they had announced other playable characters, Mom and Hyuncle. I knew about Hyuncle. I knew about Dai and Pop, but I didn't know about the other ones. But so up to 4 playable characters. Square Enix basically talked about the different abilities of all 4 characters. And then James
are the character names supposed to be puns of Mom, Pop, and Uncle?
Yep,
I think so. I mean, it's Toriyama. Or I guess it's not Toriyama. It's Hori who wrote this. Who wrote Dai, like the original manga? I don't know.
I forgot the mangaka's name off the top of my head. It's based off of a 1993 manga, I believe. So it's a really long time. But Toriyama did the art.
So it's not Toriyama doing the writing or Hori doing the writing. So I don't know who did the writing. I guess I can look that up with the power of the internet.
You can check into a mangaka. Because it's based off of the original story. But it's not just the characters, but like some of the characters undergo like class changes. Like Mom, at first she's kind of like sort of like almost a support character, but it has a gun. But then later on in the story, she the class changes into like a martial artist instead, and like Kyoko undergoes a similar process where he goes through a class change as well. So it's not just like different characters, but also different fighting styles, also because of the way the story works and how it develops. So I'm very interested to see if there'll be other characters beyond them, because there are definitely other characters that side with Dai as the story develops, and I would love to see if those characters are playable as well. Because that's some of my favorite characters in that series are those side characters, not just the ones in Dai's party.
So it looks like the original writer is Riku Sanjo.
There you go.
So I want to make sure I at least credit the right person, right, even though all the others are involved in some way, of course, with the current Dragon Quest series. And then the last preview / feature set that went up on the site this week is tied to probably the biggest announcement of the week. And that is, of course, James is over at Final Fantasy Fan Fest over in Las Vegas this week. It seems like fans of that MMO were expecting, of course, the announcement of the newest expansion, the 5th expansion for Final Fantasy XIV, which was announced, and that is Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail. And then from his on the ground, impressions of that expansion announcement, James wrote a kind of the news post just talking about what was announced with Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail, as well as a accompanying feature about what his initial impressions of the announcement are. Of course, this game is slated to come out in the summer of 2024. I believe they specified summer. Yes. But coming out next year. So there is still a lot of marketing to be had for Dawntrail Final Fantasy XIV. So the only person here that can speak to Final Fantasy XIV with direct experience in the absence of James is, of course, Chow. Hello, Chow. So Chow, I'm gonna tee you up like this. The title of James's feature, not just his news announcement of the expansion coming next year, but his accompanying kind of opinion piece, is Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail feels like housekeeping. Not that that's a bad thing. Do you kind of agree with what James is getting at here? What is James getting at here? Like, what is announced with Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail? I know it's kind of like a new story arc for the game. It's kind of decoupled from the long progressing story of the previous expansions. How excited are you for Dawntrail?
Not totally excited. I mean, it looks good.
Why is that?
I just feel like the game is not. Wow. Okay, it's more like a casual experience now, which is what it aims to be, and I'm more of the hardcore raider experience, and that's kind of like being ignored over the years. I feel like the game has been trying to cater to everybody, and at the same time, it's it kind of dumbs down the game a bit. If you get what I'm trying to say.
James has talked about several like ultimate raids and new savages that have been added. Like, are those like infrequent or?
Oh no, they're there, but it's like they come out like once every, I don't know, like 5 months or so. Every time there's like a new savage tier that is out, and then new ultimate tiers. I don't do ultimate yet because asking a whole group of 7 other people to make 100-hour commitment for the span of a couple of months is pretty tough to find someone like that. And what happened when your group disbands because of deaths in these raids? It's gonna be salt-inducing, right? So you're not gonna run in with people that you don't trust, right?
Well, let's back up a bit. Dawntrail, like I watched like the teaser trailer for it. I kind of know that it's a new story that takes place on a new continent. It seems to have a very pirate theme, or at least like nautical theme to it. It has like some returning characters, but I'm not in the weeds to kind of know like
it
what are
has all
people,
return characters.
yeah, like what are people latching onto for this announcement, other than the fact that it's the expected, because people were expecting a new expansion just because of the
People
release
already
cadence of.
know it
Go
has
ahead.
to be there because during like in Endwalker, there's a speech from one of the characters. He basically tells you like spoilers of like places that you have not yet visited. It's like nice. This guy's basically dropping 7.0 in a nutshell to you. It's like, have you explored the lost city of gold? Have you explained there? And you're like, huh? What? It's like I thought we already explored all the worlds, you know? And and it's basically that location being come to life. Apparently, it's the loading screen. This location's actually like you see existed since A Realm Reborn existed. Apparently, it's one of the loading screens of a location that you can never go to, and now you can get there. So, well, there you go.
So if I ask, like, hey, before this was announced this week, were people speculating that this might be like where you might end up in the new expansion? Like, was it kind of like, um, well signposted, or was it a bit of a surprise?
It's still a bit of a surprise because you don't know where you're going. Because the current story arc is running and fighting a different conflict in a different place, so we don't know what's going to happen after that, right? And so going from here it's definitely a surprise. Obviously, it's a lot more scaled down because the Warrior Light already deal with like cosmic level threats, and now it's like it's scaled down. Now he's fighting some random person like this lizard monster in the beach somewhere, right? It's like, oh, I guess that's what happens after you save the world. I feel like this whole entire expansion, it could have been done with like completely different characters because it's not about the old story anymore. But obviously, if it's about new characters, they know people will not resub because people have grown really fond of the Final Fantasy XIV cast. So at least that's how I would see it.
Yeah, it's been pretty interesting, like seeing what the FF14 players like. It seems like the reaction is like more divisive, like among players this time around because like people were so used to like the high stakes, like all the emotional feelings of Endwalker, and like this is like obviously a step back at the start of a new journey. So this is like more of a summer vacation theme type of like the most obviously predictable thing about this is like you're gonna go through this expansion, and at the end of this expansion there's gonna be a story hook into something bigger, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, for and people and I think for some people they kind of more of a clean break, and like you were saying, stating, Child's like, why are the Scions like with you for this? You know, like what the fuck are they doing there? And of course, some part of it is like fan service as well, and for some people it kind of rubs them the wrong way in the way that they're approaching this, with Dawntrail. And obviously, like still it still has like that approach of like, hey, you're fighting once again the new world again. There's some sort of like colonizing sort of like aesthetic to it that might not go well depending because they kind of retreaded this ground once before with Stormblood, um and so forth. So and as James is talking about, like it feels like housekeeping is because like it's not that like they're like the way that they're presented is not really most of this like the story isn't really the focus of how they're like announcing this, right? Like there's not like the story is less of a focus and more of like um system changes in terms of like of course this is like the fan fest that like initially announces like what's the name of the expansion and like the general overview of the expansion. They're not showing like what the new classes are specifically yet, but they announced there's going to be two new jobs. They're going to be both DPS focused. The teaser that Yoshi P gave on stage, of course, is with a shirt. He was wearing a TMNT shirt. Ninja is already in the class in the game, so it can't be Ninja. But
Well, the
so
thing is, in this game, is like, okay, a lot of classes like share like similar gear, right?
Mhm.
So let's just say you get a bard, they share gear with dancer, or dragoon shares gear with the reaper, and all the healers share, same set, right?
So
So,
what are the leading guesses now? It's going to be two new DPS classes,
well,
and based on the shirt, like what are people thinking are going to be the new jobs?
the reason why I'm talking about the gear being shared is that the Yingja class in Final Fantasy XIV, it's the only person that can wear it. Nobody else can wear Yingja gear except for Yingja, right?
Okay.
So it's like all this inventory space being unused. So I'm sure like the next class having to use Yin Gear. At least that's what I am assuming, right?
Okay. So but are there like have there been like any guesses yet on like what the new class
Some
could be?
people think it would be their guess is like they call it Rune Fancer. That's one of the guess because
Okay.
they see the warrior light using like a sword, and they probably think it's like a magic hybrid
Because
sword.
everyone thought pirate at first, with the trailer. That
Yeah.
was kind of the initial guess, but we were like, okay, it might be one of those, but not maybe just that.
So what Yoshi P said is like in this expansion, both of the new class are DPS based. That's what people are getting at.
Mhm.
So there will be a new melee class, and there will be a new
New range class.
range
DPS.
caster because
Okay.
there's only
Right.
there's black mage and there is red mage. Red mage is kind of like a hybrid, so it feels kind of weird. Like I know like gameplay wise it doesn't feel that much different, but like just how it plays.
Yeah,
it's like
because the last time the newest classes before these were like, well, one was like using funnels, and that was a healing support.
yeah, that's my main
Sage,
class.
right?
Yeah, that's my main class. I mean,
What was the other one? Was it Reaper, or was that
yeah, it was
before that?
Reaper.
Okay.
The new classes is like I feel they were great, but the problem is like if you get them, you'll feel that they're incomplete until you reach max level. It's like they're missing like their entire like the skill kit that makes their combo flow naturally. So that's how I would say Reaper is. It's like this class feels gimped unless you get to level like 90, right? So that's how I would say.
So going over like the housekeeping stuff. So one of the big things that they're doing is that they're doing a graphical overhaul of the game. They're like higher quality assets. They kind of did side by comparisons over like new character models, new environmental assets. They said this won't all drop at the same time. Like they're going to out this change. Obviously first like with the latest content, and then they'll be like kind of working backwards almost on like re-implementing this graphical change to like older pieces of content as well. It just won't be all at once. It'll be like a rolling change. So this is also applying like also like all the NPCs in the game as well, of course. So that they were talking about that, just character models, environmentals, lighting. It's going to be a big overhaul on that end. They were talking about just more minute stuff with like the gear changes, like being able to uh, implement more die, like up to 2 die per die colors.
Dude,
On, like,
I think
piece of
that's the
gear.
most hype news about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of people cheered on that news. Yeah, because I kept an
yeah.
eye on the live stream. Like a lot of people cheered on that.
Because
Yeah, that's
basically fashion is the real end games for MMO. Because in my days when I used to play Aeon, okay, I would spend thousands of dollars to get that piece of item to make my character look that way. Because
Hey, Chow, I remember in the early days of this podcast, we used to just kind of go around table about like what everyone was playing instead of assigning a few games to talk about each week. And you were playing Ion Classic for like 4 or 5 weeks in a row. So it wasn't that long ago that you were still playing Ion.
hey, but
so
but I don't. I still miss my old gear. I miss the fucking maxed out crap that I used to have.
other changes. They're gonna expand the free trial, FF14 free trial, up to Stormblood now, so you can go from the beginning of the game up to the end of Stormblood with a free trial. It's not like it's being rolled out. I think spring, sometime next year.
That's a hell of a good deal. Even though I don't like Stormblood's story, Stormblood is like where the game is. It's kind of like this is where like the gameplay has peaked, and after that, every game is basically a Stormblood 3.5, like 1.5, Stormblood 1.52. Like in gameplay perspective wise, there wasn't been any major changes since Stormblood came out because I guess they feel like this is formula been perfected. It's like why should we change it? Why fix something that's not broken yet until people are bored of it? I guess, right?
Yeah. And this also benefits because they finally announced, at the like near the end of the presentation, Yoshi-P brought out Phil Spencer, and they finally are bringing FF14 to Xbox. I think they're holding like a beta like earlier next year, and then I think by the launch of Dawntrail, I think it'll be on Xbox. It's coming to Xbox Series and S, and it'll couple well with the free trial. Obviously, they didn't announce anything about like a Game Pass release yet. I'm sure they're still like kind of planning that out and really want that on the service. So finally, this has been many years in the making of wanting to try to get FF14 on Xbox.
It
And
only took 11 years.
It made me think about it a lot because they recently did like a whole update on the game Xbox game like live and the Xbox Live service as well, with like having different tiers of like you have like this service with online multiplayer and this service without at like at certain price, um, different price tiers. So it really makes you wonder like that, like the timing of that announcement coupled with this announcement a few weeks later. It's like I really wonder if they had to really hold out for that before they could announce this, because for in my mind I was like, this doesn't make sense to news at FF14 FanFest because every single person in that building is already playing FF14. How many of them are actually going to touch the Xbox version? You know,
I was actually wondering that too, and I actually saw on the Xbox Twitter, I refuse to call it X or whatever account, that they have it's now, as the time I speak, their pinned post basically says like welcome to Xbox Final Fantasy 14. And I'll be honest, I was a little bit like, this seems cynical because it's not on Xbox yet. And like you said, the place that they announced this, everyone's already playing it. So who is this announcement for? But then I read like and kind of softened a bit. And this, I guess I'm not totally surprised by now that I sit down and think about it. When I look at this Xbox tweet about them announcing Final Fantasy 14 coming to Xbox, there's a lot of positive comments on it, a lot of likes, a lot of people that just play Final Fantasy 14 and are just excited to hopefully witness like
I mean, I'm
a
sure.
new wave of players
Of
coming.
course, the current community of FF14 is always like more than welcomed. They're welcoming the new players. I'm just thinking about like the wider message. Like, if you're gonna announce this, it would, in my mind, this be like at the Naughty 3 back in June. Like, if you wanted to capitalize
I
on it.
agree. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. In that context, it would have been made more sense to announce it in late June to an Xbox audience rather than announcing it now to a Final Fantasy 14 audience.
I don't know. I
So-
must be one of those insane people that double dips so that I could play on the console and play on the PC.
Okay, but okay, if you're playing this on PlayStation and PC already, are you gonna be like, oh yeah, time to triple drip with the Xbox?
Maybe if I have an Xbox.
So yeah, you're definitely the majority of child. But
Yeah.
but I mean, it's cool. I mean, it's cool that they finally did it. I'm not saying that.
Yeah,
that
more. It's like I am happy because now that I could play with more people, and
Yeah,
there's
it's
also
really
like that whole group of people saying it's like, well, I didn't want to play it because it's not on the Xbox. It's like now you have no excuse. Now you have to play it. So
how about time? How about time, child? Is
Final
that an
Fantasy
excuse?
14 is a way less commitment than Trails of Cold Steel 4 and and 3. Okay.
That's definitely a comparison, I guess. See,
Look, I'll tell you this. By the time I finish all the way up to Endwalker, I still haven't even gotten a Cold Steel 4 guide done. I will tell you, like, in time wise.
Okay, how about doing how about a walkthrough of FF14? All of FF14.
No, that's too hard because I am not Ultimate Raider. Because you'll need like a galaxy brain to explain these formulas on how to kill these bosses. Like, oh yeah, person A must be in position B. If he's not in position B, he gets his whole team killed.
Speaking of raids, they're finally implementing like an in-game UI to like plan out
instead of
raid
having a
encounters.
ghetto one doing
Yeah, instead of using like a third-party app or like a third-party source to like get it, they're finally adding like a visual, like a in-game UI to show like visually to your like raid party, like, hey, this is how we want to like do our formation during like this certain phase of the boss. Like you can actually just do that all in game now, which is kind of probably a welcome change, on one that took way too long to implement.
I think this is the best change because this is also like when you play with other people online, it's like, okay, basically when you follow online, this guy had in mind that he's probably going to do the Mario Kart strat, and you in mind, you're going to do the runaway strat.
Right.
And then you have this whole conflict. It's like, hey, it's like, why did everyone die? It's like, oh, I thought we were doing the Mario Kart strat.
It is. Yeah, hopefully this will minimize that more, and hopefully get more people on like the same page, on that. So that'll help clear things up a lot. They also announced a collaboration with Fall Guys.
Yay!
Yeah, so you're gonna have FF14 costumes coming to Fall Guy, but it's also the other way around where FF14's Golden Saucer, there's gonna be like a Fall Guys mode you can do with their FF14 characters as well. So that's a goofy thing, but everyone having fun.
Exciting stuff.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, I don't know if there's any other highlights to it that I kind of missed. Like this is like kind of working off of memory of like the keynote that I kept an eye on.
Yeah,
And-
you basically covered most of the details. I mean, today they're still having it today, but today is more like 6.5 news, right? Which is the next oncoming big patch that will happen 4 months from now, I believe. Like, I'm not sure of the exact release date, but if they're having the second part of the Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker soundtrack in November, I'm sure the release is probably about 4 months from now, right? I mean, they're not going to spoil the songs while these things are, while these things are still active, I guess, right? At least that's my guess.
I think the weirdest part of that keynote was them introducing like the new Square Enix CEO, and he's like a FF14 player as well. Like them like cheering all that on. I'm like,
I like the CEO. He's full of energy. Even in the 16 conference, he's trying to tell the whole audience how much he was a fanboy of Final Fantasy 1 back when he played Nintendo. This guy is constantly trying to fanboy.
He looks very young. Like I look at it, it's like, wow, he looks really young. So that was interesting. But yeah, I mean, obviously having this Square Enix CEO BFF14 player himself is like pretty much a good sign for this game's future to get ongoing support, and like there's no threat of like FF14 shutting down anytime soon at all. So that's
I'll be honest, I can only remember the new CEO's name because it is Kiryu. Like, and I don't remember what the old CEO like. When I think of, I'm like, how long ago did Wada step down? Like 2013. Like I haven't paid attention like the last.
Wada was an idiot. Okay, Wada was a complete idiot. It was like that whole story about him moving his entire building to another branch, all because a fortune teller told him that you have good fortune. And as soon as he went there, fucking Nobuo Uematsu immediately quit his job because like, oh, I'm going freelance now. It's like this is way too far. Like rip.
But yeah, I mean that's kind of the basic info coming out of like the I mean like the biggest info coming out of like FF14 FanFest at the moment, like in terms of like new announcements and what they got in store for that game. It's doing well. They're doing their next expansion and seeing how that goes.
And if there's like any other wrap ups from the FanFest, we'll obviously wrap back up with James. I believe next week, if not next week, then the week after. In terms of other news this week, some of this we've already teased. Other of it is just a little bit of a footnote here at the very end. We did get an extended look at another one of the fall releases in October. This is Lords of the Fallen, which is previously known as The Lords of the Fallen, previously known as Lords of the Fallen 2. Did get a extended gameplay presentation, so uploaded to their YouTube channel was like an 18-minute showcase of just pure gameplay. My main takeaway, I haven't watched all 18 minutes in entirety. I know I could have easily in the last hour, but my main takeaway looking at this is that this is a next gen only game. So PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. And it just looks, it shows it. It looks really nice. It has like lots of fun particle effects, just really clean looking. The art style is very Souls-like. Sorry. But just
oh, this whole podcast is so good with this.
but just in general, like I was watching some of the spell effects of this gameplay, and even though the art direction, art style might be a little bit derivative, just like it does look really clean, really nice, really pretty, and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It's PS5 exclusive, Xbox Series exclusive, PC with equivalent hardware exclusive. So
it reminds me of Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart in terms of like its interdimensional mechanic, because like the main hook of this game is like when you die, you don't like it's not like a game over screen. Like you get transported to like the realm of the dead from the realm of the living. So you have like one final chance, to kind of get that like like one final shot like at the boss, for example. and like it's like rendering both of these like realms. I don't know if it's like at real time or simultaneously, but it kind of reminds me of how Rift Apart does like its whole interdimensional portals like seamlessly on the fly, rendering like entire different worlds. Because you can also like from the realm of the living, you have like this lamp that like can show like the realm of the dead. Because like the living version and the dead version of the world has like different enemies, different pathways, different secrets, different treasures, different loot, and sort of that stuff. So it kind of incentivizes you to kind of explore the world like in both versions of living and the dead, and they showed that off in that extended gameplay presentation as well, and showing how like how different enemies react and like behave in like the living versus the realm of the dead sort of stuff. So it's kind of fascinating to see like how like the underlying tech of the game is sort of like that Rift Apart, but in terms of like how you render entirely different environments, but like almost in like a seamless, simultaneous, live in tandem sort of fashion.
Not related to the topic at all, but something that happened in the last week that I am incredibly amused by is that the Rift Apart recently-ish either came out or is coming out on PC,
Yeah, it's out.
and Digital Foundry like reviewed it, of course, its PC port, and I saw them like sharing. I forget if it was Digital Foundry Direct or if it was Dark One X, but playing that game on like a PS4 equivalent hard drive and watching them trying to do the rift mechanic and how it just like chugs
Oh boy, yeah,
through
I
that.
can see that.
I just saw that, and I was amused by that. As someone who doesn't really have an interest in Ratchet and Clank, it's like, you know, even though it was coded in like marketing mumbo jumbo, these SSDs are a lot more capable than hard drives of 10 years ago, and that was just like complete, unassailable evidence to that fact. So yeah, that was just kind of fun to watch for the PC
Yeah,
gamers.
I think some I forgot if like Starfield's PC release like either recommends or mandates like being installed on SSD, but like it's like I think that it's really coming to that point where like more and more PC games are like, please install this and play this on an SSD.
Yeah. The next major news that we had this week, two bits of news from two different sources for the upcoming spin-off title Fate Samurai Remnant. This is another late September release. Now that I look at it, it might literally be... Oh no, so Lords of the Fallen is October. Fate Samurai Remnant is late September. So there is the ongoing Fate Go Fest, and I guess some of this information came out from that. But in addition, this is something I learned just this morning. There is a Fate magazine of sorts, Type Moon Ace magazine, that
Yes.
published an interview with Kanoku Nasu, who are I'm not sure if they're the creators of just specifically this game or the wider Fate universe.
They're the original author of like Fate Stay Night, Tsukihime, Witch on the Holy Night, and then they also wrote some chapters of the Fate Grand Order game, like specific chapters, not all of it.
And then this was the bit that you kind of teased earlier, is that there are story elements to Fate Samurai Remnant that are from the same writing team as Fire Emblem Three Houses.
Yeah, so at in the Type Moon Ace, like the Type Moon is not like a frequent magazine release. It only comes out like when there's a lot like a Fate or like a lot of Type Moon projects in production, and then like usually they'll release like an issue of that. So it's very like maybe once every several years
Oh,
sort
okay.
type of magazine.
I was thinking that this was like some sort of like monthly thing where it's like,
No. This is a
okay,
very like it's usually a special occasion when these
okay.
issues of that comes out. So there was a lengthy interview section, the Fate Samurai Remnant section of that magazine between Nasu and Ko Shibusawa, who is the CEO of Koei Tecmo. And there's a lot of amusing aspects of that. It's a really incredible interview. It's a really down to earth sort of interview that Kite translated parts of it for the site that he did himself. And there's also like a translation up on the Grand Order Reddit that came in 3 parts because that's like people wanted like the exactly like the whole interview translated there. So so I read through all of that. It was really fascinating. Before we get into it, like some of like the high level abusing things is like one Shibusawa, this Koei Tecmo CEO, legendary person in the game industry over there in Japan. He's been playing Fate Go for 6 years, consistently, before even like announcing this project. And also Nasu is a big Neo fan. He really likes Neo, and both of them have put hundreds of hours into each other's game.
Nasu also said that Wolong is harder than Neo, which I don't know how you come to that conclusion.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like the original Neo, really?
But since Shibusawa has like a really really like great respect of like Nasu's work, and he's just a big fan of like Moon in general. Like he wanted his like the best Koei Tecmo staff working on Fate Samurai Remnant. So on the writing side, there are some like Type Moon writers like I think Higashide and several other writers from Type Moon working on Fate Samurai Remnant. But for the Koei Tecmo writing team side of it, they're having the same writing team from Fire Emblem Three Houses working on Fate Samurai Remnant, which is a pretty big deal. Not something we previously knew. It's like, oh wow, they're really pulling out all the stops for this, because they took a lot of great care on making the story and writing like compelling in this game. So they're really pulling out all the stops here. So for some people it might rub them the wrong way. For some people, right there, they're really excited as well, because like Three Houses like has a pretty interesting story, but I think it's really strained by having different multiple routes on it.
Right.
Yeah, so we'll see how this shapes up when Fate Samurai Remnant comes out. But I think that was one of the key takeaways from that interview. Other than that, I highly recommend checking out Kite's article, and if you want to like read more about like what Nasu and Shibusawa talked about, like go on the Fate Grand Order Reddit and like just like type in interview on the search bar, and then you'll find the Nasu and Shibusawa translation on their interview as well. And it's a really really enlightening and fun interview to read, because it's just basically two big head honchos like being big fans of each other and like talking about like how this project came together, and like it's kind of a very down to earth sort of tone that like I really appreciated in these types of interviews. It's not really super buttoned up or anything. So it only makes me like more excited about the game. Like I'm really really looking forward to like how Samurai Remnant shapes up.
This isn't new information, but reading this does just kind of hammer home like how much Three Houses was a Koei Tecmo venture, which that's not new news. But like the fact that, oh yeah, Fate Samurai Remnant is also being, developed by Koei Tecmo. So of course they have some of that same talent. Because my brain just still thinks of Fire Emblem as like an intelligent systems property. And it's a little bit almost defeating where like, oh, I guess when it's truly intelligent systems, you end up with Fire Emblem Engage. And then it was Koei Tecmo bringing in a lot of the different vibes and feels, and all the stuff we were talking about just a bit ago with the way that Three Houses was able to break free. Like, oh, these apparently Koei Tecmo is kind of damn good at doing what they're doing, even if they're licensed an IP from, in this case, Type Moon, in the previous case, Intelligent Systems. So I'm excited. Like, as someone who has only dipped their toes into Fate, I've only watched the original anime, but I'm just excited to see just the reception that this game gets as kind of like a spin-off title that's not really attached to the other existing
I think that was the
Fate
strength, its
IPs.
benefits. Yeah, it's not like a big barrier of entry. It's like even if you're just taking it as a standalone thing, I think you'll be totally fine.
Yeah, I was gonna actually ask, like, if someone said, "Hey, I have zero experience with Fate, could I play this?" My impression seems to be kind of yes.
Yeah, I
Like,
think so.
so the fact that it is kind of divorced from that, I think, is also to this game's benefit. As kind of like, oh, if you're interested in this, you can kind of see some of the same ideas or themes that inspired this in all these other IPs, or the Unlimited Blade Works, or the movie trilogy.
Even James, who got hands on with it at Anime Expo, he's not like really into Fate or anything like that, but he's like, yeah, I really liked what I played. It was a very fun experience, and I'm excited to play more. It's like, that's awesome.
I'm actually excited to play too. When you said it's not a Musou game, that's
Yeah,
all the words I need to hear.
but like anyone who's played it, like, is like, they're like, yeah, it's not a Musou. James says it's not a Musou. My friend who was at Anime Expo who played it, who likes Dynasty Warriors, he's like, yeah, it's not a Musou, but I really like what I played. I want to play more. And even Nasu himself in the interview, he's like, oh, but I heard Omega Force was working. I was like, oh, it's gonna be like a Fate Musou. And then he was like really pleased. Like, it's like, oh no, it's not like a Fate Musou at all. Like, it's really cool. He was expecting, like, not to say like it's like he was expecting the bog standard Dynasty Warriors experience. Like, it's like they created something really different and something unique out of this. It's not just Fate Muso. It's like it's very interesting to see like anyone who's like played this for themselves. It's like, oh no, it's not a Muso, and that's cool.
It
And
looks.
I guess
Oh,
like
go ahead.
another thing, just announced at Fate Grand Order Fest as well. They had a live stream panel or event for Fate Samurai Remnant, and like they showed, they kind of went over like info that we already knew and like showed some live gameplay. Not too much. It's not basically the same build as Anime Expo from what my friend was telling me. But they also announced like 2 new characters coming to Fate Samurai Remnant. One is Chulainn, which is people who know played Fate Stay Night or like or watched Fate Stay Night will know he's Lancer in that original story. So he'll be in Fate Samurai Remnant, and a new character, Tamamo Aria, will be in there. Tamamo Aria has been mentioned before, like in Fate Extra CCC, which is like a PSP game, and one of the protagonists in Fate Extra is Tamamo, and like there's like different versions of Tamamo that represent her different tails. She's like a fox, but she has like 9 tails, and Tamamos that represent like her different tails. So finally, one of those Tamamos designs have been revealed, which will show up in this game, Tamamo Arya. And there's a whole greater Type Moon lore behind Tamamo shit, but it's not going to be super relevant in the game. It's just like for a long time Type Moon fans, like, oh shit, they finally revealed like the design for Tamamo Arya. We've heard her in passing before, but never like the design for. So they revealed that. So it's just as we're getting closer and closer to release in late September, they're gonna show off more of this game, and looking forward to it. It's it looks
kind of
cool.
like that because that's kind of like one of those things where it's like you don't have to know how this person had been previously teased, but if you do, you get just a little bit more from that announcement. So that's kind of
Yeah.
neat.
So they kind of balance it in like a very smart way. It's not like it's not like something that's like, oh, it's crucial to know. It's like, no, it's like a kind of like a little wink and nod to fans who are already into it, obviously, because they're gonna be they're gonna be like the primary ones championing this thing as well.
Outside of some release dates, the last bit of news we got was another kind of media dump for the upcoming Japanese release date of East 10 Nordics. So this is a list of a lot of we've already kind of talked about a lot of the major gameplay elements of this of East 10. So we're kind of at the point that we always kind of, I don't know, I kind
We
of
love
try to
NPCs.
yeah, so all the different like town NPCs, the different shop owners. So I'll be honest, I haven't dug through here exactly what all these different NPCs do, but we got a model for each of these people, exactly what role they play in the story of East 10 Nordics.
Did any of them come out in previous East titles, Adam, like the other one you saw?
No, none of these guys do, as far as I know.
Oh man, that's it.
There was one that maybe not in this news post, so I guess I'll just go ahead and state it. These characters are Momina, Romez, Jewel, Ashley, Erval, Joel. Why'd I call it Jewel? Billy Jewel. But anyways, it might have not been this recent list of NPCs, but maybe the last prior one. They have a returning character from East. Is it 2?
Yeah.
So I remember, like, I've played East 2, but for me that was like 4 hours because it's not a long game. Back when it got a PC release in English on Steam in like 2012 or so, and I had completely forgotten about this character, but kind of fun just to have again a callback to something like that. Now I am blanking on this. Remind me, East 10 is pretty early in Adult's Adventure. Does it take place right after East 2?
I think it's after Celceta, which is after East 2.
So it goes 1 to Celceta 10. So 1 to quote unquote 4, 10. So okay, and I kind of like that because the East 9, of course, was the opposite, where it was like the furthest, like oldest adult we had seen. So having a bit of a younger adult is kind of fun here.
There's huge news behind this info drop of East 10, though.
What is that?
Fishing.
Oh yeah, real RPG. Chrono Kaseki, is that an RPG?
It's important,
Fishing.
There is fishing in Kuro Kaseki too.
Yeah, Kuro 1, no fishing. Kuro 2, big fishing.
and for what it's worth, I've heard Kuro 1 is better than Kuro 2. So I'm gonna just extrapolate from that and just say that fishing is a detriment to any game it's in. I'm just kidding. Nope. Obviously, so there's some details here about fishing in East 10, and then of course details on all the different NPCs that they've detailed here. And of course, I know that James is intending to import this before the end of September. Of course, we're not exactly sure when Nice America will assumedly Nice America will be announcing some sort of localization effort for this game. The only
It's
thing
so
that's
weird. Look, it's still so weird because we're getting all this English PR for East 10, and it's like coming from Clouded Leopard.
right.
Oh man.
Because
Can't wait
for
to
Nice,
try that game.
because for Nice, obviously Hajimari no Kisaki just came out 2 weeks ago in English as Trails into Reverie. Of course, we have the upcoming Nayuta Boundless Trails also being published, originally developed by Falcom way back when and being published by Nice America here in the West. So past that release, then you assume that the next thing to be announced will be East 10 and or an official announcement for
Think about it. Think about it. This we're getting localization of the English news cycle of East 10 from a company that's not even doing the English localization of the game. But they do the Chinese local release of it instead. But they they localize the English news cycle of it.
Nothing about Falcom makes sense these days.
Oh man, dude!
Well,
It's
the sort of
it's so absurd.
It's the sort of thing though that like if podcasts and or games media, just the landscape in general, was like this back in the 90s, like this is probably like for Falcom's kind of like a fossil in a way, and I don't say that with any judgment, just like I feel like this would have been more common 20 years ago to have kind of like the long delay between Japanese and English release, and the fact that you'd have like different people responsible for localizations in different areas and language being kind of up in the air in terms of what languages were accessible in what regions. But it just seems nowadays we're so used to even the longtime holdouts like Atlas. Now all those games are worldwide releases. Gust, even the last couple of years, has moved to pretty regular worldwide releases. So like Falcom is just kind of like the one leftover vestige of a bygone era where that's not the case.
Kind of like the weird sad part of it is like the quote unquote way you kind of improve the situation for Falcom, if you could call it like quote unquote improvement, is for them to get bought out like by a bigger company that has like that can invest in them and like in a way that like just makes like global simultaneous releases possible because they have the resources and manpower and time to do it under a bigger company, but that also has like other bad implications as well down the line too if it's done irresponsibly.
Falcom to be acquired by Microsoft.
By
Sega, and then by Microsoft.
I mean, you never know. I mean, we'll see. I don't know, man. I have two minds about like Falcom getting acquired. Like, if they ever get acquired, I'd be of two minds of it.
Because like Falcom's like one of the OGs. They've been doing this for almost the greater part of a century. Not quite there. I think it's like 40 years. But the fact that it's been that long is crazy. The fact that just saying simply decades doesn't quite do it service, because not just decades, nearly 4 decades.
Yeah, almost half a century. Yeah.
And the last couple announcements here are just some final release dates for some upcoming games. Oceanhorn 2, Knights of the Lost Realm, will be releasing on August 2nd for PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. Though it originally released in Apple Arcade back in 2019. So this is just this is not the first game that we've seen kind of be unshackled from Apple Arcade's kind of subscription service and make itself available individually through in this case both console services as well as through Steam. Nothing else coming out in early August. Monster Hunter Now, this is the game that surprisingly kind of headed off our Summer Games Fest discussion back in late June from James's hands-on experience with it. Will be releasing for mobile devices on September 14th.
Yeah, they had a live stream for it. Like you actually got to see like like direct feed gameplay. I'm like, wow, that actually looks pretty fun. I'm actually going to give it a shot. And like that looks. I think the thing that amused me is that they have an AR mode because all these fucking types of games have like AR mode, so you can like go like display like in-game assets into like the real environment through like your camera phone, and like so you can just like have like a Rathalos like in front of like some fucking
There's a
on
Rathalos in
the
your
streets.
living room or whatever.
That's right. Yeah, do you want a Rathalos in your bedroom? I want a fucking. I just want like basil like bombing. My place. There you go, basil geese. The real AR
I don't want to
spirits.
see Kazoo in the restroom.
Oh yeah,
So,
don't put the Kazoo there. Keep the Kazoo. I wouldn't want to see that anywhere. Like in a real environment background.
Just skip that monster.
Yeah.
I
But
did
that
I did go back to Monster Hunter Sunbreak and play through like title update 1 stuff a few weeks back. So I'm slowly making my way through
are
some
you
of
doing
that
Monster
stuff.
Hunter now? Are we Monster Hunter nowing?
Probably not, just because I don't have access to my phone regularly throughout the day. If I did, I would consider it, but I don't. So
When you get home,
when I get
Monster
home,
Hunter now.
I'd like to play other games when I get home.
Wow, what the fuck? Are you saying Monster Hunter now is not a real game?
Well, how about this? I'll wait for impressions. I'll wait for the review,
Oh,
the RPGsite.net review on Monster Hunter
oh,
Now.
I hope you're not even citing that to me.
To no one, just to see. Like,
Oh, okay.
I trust RPGsite.net for all of my
Oh,
RPG adjacent video game news.
all right, Chow. I guess you're right about your next review. You're getting
no.
excited right now.
And then
Good luck.
the last bit of news that we have here, I think people who've been following this game aren't quite surprised, but still officially announced this week, is that Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes has pushed its release window back to 2024, specifically Q2 of 2024. I guess it was originally announced just to be a unspecified time in this year, 2023, which of course we're in the back half of now. Accompanying the delay announcement to 2024 for Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes, Rabbit and Bear and publisher 505 Games did kind of give us a little bit of an Easter egg. I don't know if Easter egg's the right word, but they shared some of the character art for the trio of protagonists from the initial spin-off game from Eiyuden Chronicle Rising. So Garou and I don't remember the other two names. I'm honestly
CJ and
blanking on them.
Isha.
CJ and Aisha.
Yeah, so we got new character art for them as they will appear in Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes as one of the as a trio of the 100 heroes. So that's kind of neat. A little bit of a kind of a fun little, for to accompany a delay announcement. I think that seems kind of appropriate. Like, hey, here's a little fun thing to look forward to for those that did play Eiyuden Chronicle Rising, which was kind of an extra bonus in the first place. Like, hey, those that are waiting for this game that have played Rising, here's a little bit of something to look forward to. So this game this year is packed enough, so I say let it cook.
Yeah.
I mean, 2024.
Yeah, it's no problem, for them to delay it if they, the delay it for as long as you need to make the game like a really good game, They also showed like a 3-minute video at their Kickstarter post with the delay, like just showing like new gameplay footage, nothing like crazy or anything, just seeing the game in motion and random encounters and all that sort of stuff, like seeing like with the battle UI, it looks like things are shaping up, looks neat. But yeah, I mean that's we stated on this this podcast before that don't ever treat like Kickstarters as like some sort of like advanced pre-order,
I
like
mean, they have given warnings to backers for a long
yeah
time, since a lot of projects don't end up what it looks like,
yeah.
So
I mean, treat this like as an investment for a game that like you would like to, or something that you would like to see realized, but not note that there's not a pre-order, like don't like for the game or anything. It's just back it because you believe in it and want to see it flourish and are willing to give it the time that it may need to like see it materialize one day.
I'd have to sit down and kind of put together the whole list of what is slated to come out in 2024. But without having done that exercise yet, right now I could say that Eiyuden Chronicle probably is near the top of my list for most anticipated games of next year.
it's easy for me. It's gonna be Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. They were easiest one.
That's another
Yeah.
one, yeah. So for early 2024.
Yeah.
I'm assuming both those games will make the RPG site list for next year.
We're also waiting to get a new update on like the Suikoden 1 and 2 HD remasters as well, and seeing how those are coming along, because I think at this point those will come out before Eiyuden Chronicle, so Like it's gonna be interesting to see like how they kind of work alongside with each other.
I guess that still says, like, the Steam page for that still says 2023. So that's another
Yeah.
one that's like, I wouldn't be surprised if that's
So yes,
also
I wonder if I'll just hear about it again. Like we're just waiting till TGS, and then they'll say something about it TGS again.
Okay, well, tell me this, Josh. Are we gonna see a Sega Frontier 2 remaster by this year or next year?
I think definitely like I think next year is pretty likely, and not this year. But I definitely think we're gonna get Saga Frontier 2 as the next one. I think I'm pretty confident about that, unless they decide to do the curveball of Unlimited Saga remake or a remaster.
God.
Well, why are you so scared of Unlimited Saga, man?
Terrible experience. Sorry, it's not quite
I,
the
I,
Unlimited.
I want it to be a rematch. I don't want it to them to remake. I think we've advanced enough as a species to finally understand how to play Unlimited Saga. I think we've all grown up, and we all have the understanding now that like we have to learn how to play this game.
Josh,
Chow.
when was the
I
last time
remember
you?
when. Sorry to interrupt, but I remember when Saga Frontier Remaster was coming out. You were really excited for that game. Do you like 2 better or worse than 1? Like, should I be really excited for the prospect of a Saga Frontier 2 remaster?
2 is very different. It's a very imbalanced game. It's good in some ways and bad in some ways.
I think it depends on what you like about Saga Frontier 1, because Saga Frontier 2 is a more linear game. It's not like your multiple protagonists open approach.
I also think it's a very easy Saga game, except for the last boss. The last boss is ridiculously hard, while most of the rest of the game is like super easy for some reason. Very imbalanced, and if you did a very poor playthrough, you might have to restart the whole game because the
I don't
last
think
boss is.
I assume they're gonna quality of life enhancements, so you don't have to go do that. But
Yeah, because there's no place to grind in the last dungeon, and there's no place to heal, and your weapon has limited durability. So, if you didn't plan out too well and just got to the last dungeon, you could be totally fucked out of playthrough. So, about the second game in a nutshell.
That reminds me, I still haven't played the Minstrel Song remaster. That came out in 2022 December, right? Minstrel Song.
yeah, that's why I think like definitely not this year, but I think maybe next year we can probably see another Saga thing. They're also still working on a brand new Saga game, I think, as well. So
Yeah, that's what
whatever.
they stated. Adam, should I play Minstrel Song remaster?
I think it's one of the best games in the series. So,
Is it going to be your vote for best remake or re-release?
there's some weird things with the remake, but it's pretty good.
All right, it's on the list, on the continuously growing, never shrinking list. But yeah, so with the announcement that Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes has moved its release window back to 2024, and then they couple release dates for Oceanhorn 2 on console and PC, and Monster Hunter Now on September 14th for mobile. That covers us for a little bit of a limited news slate for this week, outside of course, the expansion announcement. And then, of course, all of the article features that have gone up on the site over the last week. So lots of reviews and some impressions from Josh. We have the Paul piece on Fantasy XIII, Nathan's piece on Fire Emblem Three Houses. We've got a few embargoes that have lifted for the new upcoming games, Dragon Quest: The Adventures of Dai. What else did I miss here? Blue Protocol, of course, got its new trailer and the preview that went up for its official English release next year. The reviews for Remnant 2 and Arcadian Atlas. So all of those are found on the site at rpgsite.net. You can also find RPG Site on all the social media channels. You can find us on Facebook, X, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. Did I forget any? I think I got them all. On all those, you can find our Discord hitting the link at the top of our homepage or going to discord.gg/RPG site. If you like this podcast, think we're doing things well, think there's things we can improve on, go ahead and leave us a comment, leave us a rating on your podcast service of choice or on the comments of the site post. And we will be back next week, almost certainly leading off with our very, very initial impressions of Baldur's Gate 3. Impressions seem to be that it's coming in hot. We likely won't have a review ready quite by then. I don't know for certain, but it'll likely just be those of us who managed to go in on or around launch day, what our very initial thoughts are for Baldur's Gate 3. My guess is that we'll have a couple different podcasts to discuss that in the time that we're allowed before we go into Starfield on all the September releases. But we'll be back next week to talk about all that stuff. So thank you all so much for listening. Until you hear from us next time, stay safe and take care. We'll talk to you all later.